The Loretto Chapel was built in 1878, but when it was finished, a problem came up. There was no way to access the choir loft, 22 feet above the main floor. Carpenters were called in, but all of them agreed that a staircase wouldn't fit in the small chapel without disrupting the space. So the sisters of the chapel, in a desperate bid, prayed to Saint Joseph, the patron saint of carpenters. And the story goes that on the 9th and final day of their prayers, a man showed up with nothing but a donkey and a toolbox. He went to work on the staircase, and months later, a beautiful spiral staircase was completed. But the carpenter just disappeared without a trace, never even taking payment. Locals even put out an ad in the paper looking for him, but he was never seen again. Some believe this mysterious carpenter was Saint Joseph himself, answering the sisters' prayers. And it's not just because he mysteriously disappeared. The staircase is unlike anything anyone had seen before. It has 2 full 360-degree turns and seemed to defy physics with no visible support. It's said to have been built entirely with wooden pegs, not nails. Experts still don't know what type of wood was used either. To this day, the identity of the builder and the methods used to construct it are still unsolved. In the town of San Bernardo, Colombia in 1957, a flood hit the local cemetery, forcing workers to move the bodies. But when they did, they found that many of the corpses were completely preserved, as though they'd been mummified naturally, despite having been buried for a long time. One of the workers immediately alerted the authorities, and when the bodies were examined, they found not just the corpses, but also the clothes that they were buried in were still in remarkably good condition. This wasn't the case for other graves in the area though, where bodies had decayed to bones. What's even stranger still is that the mummies didn't show any signs of embalming, which would be expected if they'd been intentionally preserved. Could the high altitude or the unique diet of the local people have had something to do with it? Sure, but that still doesn't explain why the clothes of the mummies hadn't decayed either. It's also odd that San Bernardo is the only town in the area where mummified remains were found. Today, some of these mummies are displayed in a museum, and they still haven't decayed even without any attempts to preserve them. One of England's most famous historical mysteries revolves around the death of 2 young princes, Edward V and Richard, who vanished while imprisoned in the Tower of London in 1483. The 2 boys were the sons of King Edward IV and were the next in line for the throne. But after their father's death, they were declared illegitimate by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who became Richard III. The 2 princes were placed in the tower, and in the summer of 1483, they disappeared without a trace. Some believe they were killed, possibly on the orders of Richard III, to secure his claim to the throne. Some believe the princes were secretly taken out and buried in a hidden chamber in the tower. In 1674, bones were discovered near the tower, and though they were assumed to be the remains of the princes, modern analysis hasn't been able to prove this conclusively. The Knights Templar. These were a powerful medieval order of warrior monks, and their downfall in the early 14th century supposedly left behind one of the greatest lost treasures in history. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, ordered for their arrest. Accusing them of heresy and other charges, the Knights were tormented into confession, and the order was officially disbanded by Pope Clement V. But it was said that the Templars had hid this vast amount of treasure with gold and priceless relics. The most famous legend is that the treasure was hidden somewhere in Scotland, some say under Rosslyn Chapel, or buried deep beneath the ocean. There have been expeditions, but the treasure has, of course, never been found. It's still one of the greatest mysteries of the Middle Ages. So we often don't associate Sasquatch with history. When with supposed Bigfoot footage and reports flooding in all the time, it seems like such a modern phenomenon. But the creature has been part of Native American folklore for who knows how long. Before settlers even made their way west, stories of big hairy ape creatures had been passed down for centuries. But in the 1800s, newspapers started picking up on these strange reports coming from the frontier, especially in the Pacific Northwest. One newspaper even described the forests as being, quote, brimming with giant wild men and wood apes. The reports were pretty consistent. People said these creatures were big, walked upright, and had a terrible smell. One old account even referred to Bigfoot as the bad-smelling tree man. Around the same time, in 1865, a guy named George Gibbs started recording stories from Native American communities about the creatures. Some settlers brushed it off as myths, but by the early 1900s, there were official reports of Bigfoot sightings, and as we all know, Sasquatch's legend has only gotten bigger over time. Terrare was a Frenchman in the late 1700s who had an extremely unusual condition, an insatiable hunger. And not only would he eat mass amounts of food, he'd eat pretty much anything he could fit into his mouth. He'd go as far as eating live animals like cats, dogs, and eels. One story goes that he even ate a snake after peeling off its skin. His eating habits were so bizarre that people started taking notice, and he became this kind of one-man circus act. He'd perform in the town square, and he'd eat just bizarre things like pocket watches, corks, live animals, all in front of shocked and terrified crowds. Doctors had no idea what was going on with this guy. They figured he had some sort of stomach issue that prevented him from feeling full. As for what that was, though, nobody knew. Eventually, he was hospitalized, and that's where things got deeply disturbing. At one point, nurses found him eating parts of corpses. Terrare died at just 26 after experiencing continuous exudative diarrhea. Surgeons decided to do an autopsy, and apparently his insides were just a complete mess. Can't imagine why. Next up is the mystery of the 9th Roman Legion. Around 100 to 190 CE, the Roman Empire was set on conquering Caledonia, now known as Scotland. To do that, they sent the 9th Legion, a military unit that had already proven itself in battle across the empire. The soldiers were never seen again. At some point, they just disappeared. There's no official record of what happened to them, and considering how meticulous the Romans were about keeping track of their military, that is pretty strange. Some people think the entire legion was wiped out in such a humiliating way that no one wanted to document it. Disappearance is even rumored to be one of the main reasons why Hadrian's Wall was built, as a defensive measure against whatever had taken out that 9th Legion. In 1885, a man named Guillermo Farini, also known as William Leonard Hunt, made a strange claim, saying he'd found this mysterious city in the Kalahari Desert. He reported his discovery to both the Berlin Geographical Society and the Royal Geographical Society of Great Britain. He even published a book that year describing what he found. In it, he described strange rock formations that he believed were the ruins of some ancient city. Farini figured this city was thousands of years old, though he couldn't find any inscriptions or clear evidence to back that up. Over time, though, rumors spread about this supposed lost city, even among local indigenous people who claimed that they hadn't been the ones who built it, though. Other explorers and historians like Gustave Prelude went looking for the city, claiming the locals could lead them to the ruins, but after more searches, nothing concrete came up. Some even claimed to have seen quarries or shipwrecks in the middle of the desert, but these stories never panned out. Professor A.J. Clement tested Farini's theory and concluded that Farini probably didn't even reach the Kalahari Desert. Instead, he likely found some natural rock formations that, over time, looked man-made when they were eroded. The search for the city continues to be a mystery, but many now consider it more of a myth. In 1909, the SS Waratah, a large passenger and cargo steamship that operated between Europe and Australia, disappeared without a trace up the coast of South Africa. It was last seen near the Cape of Good Hope, but after that it vanished completely. No distress signals were sent and no wreckage was ever found. The ship had been in service for just a short time, and there were no signs of any problems before it disappeared. Some people think it sank during a storm, but there's no real proof of that. Eerily, though, the Waratah did have a bit of a reputation for strange incidents on board. Some theories say it might have been taken by pirates or hit by a huge wave, but no one knows for sure, and to this day, the Waratah's disappearance is still unsolved. The Beale ciphers are a set of 3 mysterious documents believed to hold the key to a hidden treasure buried by a man named Thomas J. Beale in the 1820s. According to the story, Beale and a group of adventurers discovered a large treasure of gold, silver, and jewels out in the west, and they supposedly buried it somewhere in Bedford County, Virginia. Supposedly, if you can crack the ciphers, you can find the treasure. The first cipher is said to describe the exact location of the treasure. The second supposedly lists the contents of the treasure, and the third contains the names and contact details of the heirs. Beale left the ciphers with his friend Robert Morris, promising to return with the key to decode them, but Beale never showed up again. Morris shared the ciphers with the public, hoping someone could figure them out, and to date, only the second cipher has been partially decoded. Why anyone would bother with the second and third cipher is beyond me though. Just tell me where it is, and then I will go and get it. I don't need a list of items if the treasure is right in front of me, and I most definitely do not need the contact info of the people it belongs to, because it will all be coming home with me. In December of 2016, a CIA officer in Havana checked into the embassy's health office complaining of nausea, headaches, and dizziness. Soon, more American and Canadian diplomats reported similar symptoms. By late 2018, 26 Americans and 13 Canadians had fallen ill, and all of them claimed the sickness started after hearing a strange noise. Some described a high-pitched sound, others said it was like marbles rolling on the floor, and one person even said it felt like a, quote, beam of sound directed at them. Doctors couldn't figure out what caused the symptoms. Some specialists thought it was like a concussion, but scans showed no signs of a head injury. So what was happening? Was the Cuban government using some kind of weapon? The theory that a sonic weapon might be involved got a lot of attention, but the CIA insisted they didn't know of any device that could cause these types of symptoms. Some said that maybe ultrasound might have been to blame, but the FBI found no evidence of it, and ultrasound is outside the range of human hearing anyway. Things got even stranger when scientists studied recordings of the sound. Two researchers believed it sounded like male crickets calling to each other. The sound was so loud you could hear it inside a diesel truck going 40 miles per hour though. But why would this cause people to get sick? They didn't have an answer. Then in 2018, something similar happened in China. An American diplomat developed the same symptoms. In the end, 15 Americans were evacuated. Was it a weapon, a weird natural occurrence, or just stress playing tricks on people's minds? No one knows for sure. Ball lightning. If you ever heard of ball lightning, you probably thought it was just an old myth, but it is real. Ball lightning is basically a floating, glowing sphere of electricity that can last for several seconds to even minutes. They've been seen during thunderstorms, but scientists still don't fully understand how they form. There are a lot of theories out there though. Some say it's an electrical discharge, others think it could be plasma or a mix of gases. The biggest issue is that ball lightning is unpredictable and incredibly difficult to study. It's appeared in different sizes, colors, and places, but no one has been able to create or replicate it in a controlled setting. There have been reports of it passing through windows or causing damage to homes and buildings even, but despite that, the ball lightning is still one of the many mysteries out there that hasn't been cracked by science. We've all heard of Alzheimer's disease. It affects millions of people worldwide, and though we know the effect it has on the human brain, we're less sure about exactly what causes it. It's one of the most unsettling puzzles in modern medicine. The disease leads to memory loss, confusion, and drastic changes in behavior, and in the end, it's fatal. Scientists have a few theories about what might be causing it, like the buildup of certain proteins in the brain, but nothing is certain. There's no clear answer for why these proteins build up or how they lead to the brain damage seen in Alzheimer's patients. Worse, there's no cure or even an effective treatment. Researchers have tried to develop treatments and therapies, but so far nothing has proven to be successful in slowing down, let alone reversing the effects. What makes this so terrifying is that Alzheimer's is only becoming more common as the population ages, and without a clear understanding of the disease, it's difficult to make progress in treating it. Between 1917 and 1928, a strange illness called encephalitis lethargica, or sleeping sickness, hit 500,000 people worldwide. Victims seemed perfectly awake, but were trapped in their own bodies. They couldn't move, and their bodies would stay completely still for hours or even days. Some could blink, speak a little, or even laugh, but otherwise they were like statues. Why anyone would feel the need to laugh in that kind of situation is beyond me, but about a third of those who got sick died. The cause of the disease is still a mystery, but one theory is that it could be connected to a rare type of brain inflammation caused by a mutated strain of Streptococcus bacteria, the same bacteria that causes sore throats. It's thought that the body's immune system might have attacked the brain, leaving the person completely helpless. Next up, we have something that's baffled scientists for years, the missing baryon problem. You might be wondering though, what exactly is a baryon? Baryons are particles like protons and neutrons that make up the core of atoms. Here's the issue. According to calculations, there should be far more of these particles scattered around the universe than we actually detect. Problem is, scientists can't find them. They know they're out there somewhere, but the question is where? The universe should be filled with these particles, but they're mysteriously absent from the places they expect to find them. Some think they might be hiding in areas where we can't observe them, like in the dark matter that makes up most of the universe's mass. Others think there could be some weird new physics we haven't figured out yet. Whatever the answer though, scientists haven't found it yet. We talked about the sleeping sickness earlier, now we've got the sweating sickness. This was a mysterious illness that spread across England during the Tudor period, mainly between 1485 and 1551. The symptoms were intense, starting with a high fever and heavy sweating, and usually it ended in death within hours. People would literally sweat to death. What makes it even more frightening was how suddenly it would strike. In just a couple of hours, the person could be dead. Outbreaks happened at random times, but then, after 1551, it just disappeared. There wasn't a cure, it just stopped happening. Another odd thing about this sickness was that it mostly affected native English people. Wealthy men were hit the hardest, and it seemed to target rural areas rather than cities. But despite all the destruction it caused, no one has ever figured out what caused it. The Minman Lights are a strange phenomenon seen in the Australian outback, with reports dating back even before European settlers arrived. The lights are usually described as glowing, fuzzy, disc-shaped orbs that hover just above the horizon. Most of the time they're white, but some people say they've seen them change color, red, green, and back again. They can be bright enough to cast shadows, but in other cases they're much dimmer. They're usually seen in areas like Channel Country and Yunta, South Australia, and they've been part of Aboriginal folklore for years. Over the years, more and more sightings have been reported, stretching from New South Wales all the way up to northern Queensland. What makes these lights especially strange is how they seem to move. Some people say the lights follow them, or come close only to disappear, then reappear later. There's even a spooky part of the story that says anyone who chases the lights will never come back. Scientists have tossed around a few ideas to explain the lights, but again, nothing definitive. Most living things on Earth need oxygen to survive, either to breathe it in or to produce it. But when scientists discovered animals living without oxygen deep in the Mediterranean Sea, well, it was a bit of a surprise. Typically, only simple organisms like bacteria can survive without oxygen, but these creatures are far more complex. They belong to a group called Loricifera, and the crazy thing is that these animals used to breathe oxygen, but they somehow adapted over time not to. As the oxygen in their environment depleted and was replaced by salts, they just found a way to deal with it. Scientists still don't fully understand how these creatures evolved like this. Kinda makes you wonder whether we really are the pinnacle of evolution after all. One of the biggest mysteries in science is why there's more matter than antimatter in the universe. First off, what's the difference between the two? Well, matter is everything around us, atoms, molecules, basically the stuff we're made of. Antimatter, on the other hand, is the opposite. It has the same mass but an opposite charge to the particles of matter. When matter and antimatter meet, they destroy each other. So if the universe started with equal amounts of both, they should have annihilated each other and left nothing behind. But clearly that's not what happened. We have stars, planets, galaxies, and people all made of matter. Antimatter is much more rare. Scientists have been trying to figure out why there's this imbalance for decades. One theory is that right after the Big Bang, tiny differences in how matter and antimatter behaved could have led to a slight excess of matter. Over time, that extra matter formed everything we see today, but that's just one theory.
Starting off the list today, we have the Tungusa Event. I am sorry if I am pronouncing that wrong, but it was an unexplained 12 megaton explosion as powerful as 12 million tons of TNT, and it occurred near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River in Russia. The event took place on the morning of June 30th in 1908, and the explosion took out an estimated 3 civilians and over 2,150 square square kilometers, 500,000 acres of forest area. It was and still is the largest impact event to take place on Earth in recorded history. Hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic weapons set off over Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Although some people believe that Nikola Tesla, the inventor of the Tesla coil, may have inadvertently caused the explosion while testing out some new technology, others believe that the explosion was caused by a meteor which either collided with the Earth, making the devastation the result of an impact event, or a meteor that exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, about 16 to 33,000 feet above the ground. I'm not sure about you guys, but I feel like if the explosion was caused by a meteor, there would have been eyewitness reports confirming the presence of a meteor. But I guess that's just me, because it remains a mystery.
Next up, we have a pretty macabre case known as the Lady of the Dunes. So on June 26, 1974, in Provincetown, Massachusetts, the body of a woman was discovered on a beach. The body was found by a family who'd been returning home from the beach, and the woman in question was found laying on a beach towel. Her head was almost completely separated from her body, and her hands had also been completely removed. This made it a lot more difficult to identify her, and guess what? They never did. There were no signs of a struggle, so it seemed like the victim may have known her attacker, but that, along with footprints leading away from the scene, were all they really had to go off of. No one in town seemed to know who this woman was, and the assailant sure wasn't going to say anything, so the case is still a complete mystery to this day.
Next on the list, the Dyatlov Pass incident. On February 26 of 1959, 2 male hikers were found dead in Dyatlov Pass in the mountains of what is current-day Russia. That's the second Russia mystery on this list. Are they hiding something? I don't know. Anyways, the 2 men had been missing for days before their body was found, and over the months that followed, the bodies of the other 7 hikers who had accompanied the men on their journey were also found. Here's the thing. The bodies were found with signs of blunt force trauma, 3rd-degree burns, and missing appendages. Not only that, but when authorities tested the deceased hikers' clothes, they found them to be radioactive. So, how did a leisurely hike turn into 9 dead men with some of the world's strangest autopsies? No one actually knows, or if they do, they aren't telling. When authorities canvassed the area, they found the men's tent, which was ripped open from the inside, shoe prints, sock prints, and bare footprints. And hypothermia was ruled out by a coroner, despite the fact that the first 2 men to be found had died wearing nothing but their underwear. The explanation given by authorities was that the men had most likely suffered from a phenomenon known as infrasound, in which wind creates a hum that vibrates at a frequency that drives people mad. But that still doesn't explain the radioactive clothes. My guess, they saw something they shouldn't have.
The vanishing of Cynthia Anderson. Cynthia Anderson was working as a legal secretary in Toledo, Ohio in 1981. A year before she disappeared, someone had spray painted "I love you, Cindy," signed GW, across from her office window. Cynthia had no idea who this GW was. Things got even more unsettling when it was painted over, but then reappeared in larger letters. Cynthia was planning to leave her job soon to join her boyfriend at a Bible college, and she was ready to leave because she'd also started receiving anonymous, disturbing phone calls at work. Her work even installed an emergency buzzer at her desk, and she kept her office doors locked at all times. On August 4th, Cynthia got to work normally. She was last seen at about 9:45 a.m. But by lunchtime, when her boss arrived, she was gone. The office was still locked from the inside too. Her car was in the parking lot, but her keys and purse were gone. There were no signs of a struggle. Most chilling was the romance novel she'd been reading was left open on her desk to a scene of the protagonist being abducted at knife point. Her case has never been solved.
At our halfway point today, we have the mystery of the original Divic Box. If you don't know what a Divic Box is, it's a box containing a Divic, which is, in Jewish folklore, an evil spirit that enters and possesses the bodies of the living. And it's also the inspiration behind the movie Possession. The Divic Box first gained popularity after it was posted by its owner on eBay, who claimed to have purchased it from a Jewish World War II survivor who had gotten it while living in Spain. When the owner went to pick it up, the woman's Haxton's granddaughter told him that growing up the box was always shut and set in high out-of-reach places, never ever to be opened. The box sold on eBay for $280 to Haxton, who opened it, and inside found a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies, dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters. Soon after opening the box, Haxton experienced a wave of bad luck, which included serious illness. So we spoke to a rabbi who advised him to place the box inside of a gold-lined wooden container. Haxton did as he was told, and then he placed that container into a military-grade safe and buried the safe in the ground. It's safe to say this guy was freaked out. It's impossible to know the truth about what happened to Haxton. I mean, maybe the box was covered in mold, but at the same time, maybe it really does contain a demon. Either way, despite multiple high offers, Haxton refuses to sell the thing. He is keeping it buried underground, and he states that the curse is real, and therefore giving the box to someone even for millions of dollars would be highly unethical.
One of the most compelling cases for the existence of spontaneous human combustion is the sudden death of Mary Reer. On July 3, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, the landlord of a small apartment building made a pretty horrific discovery. She'd come to Mary Reer's apartment to deliver a telegram. She found that the apartment doorknob was too hot to touch, and there was soot in the hallway. So she had to get nearby house painters to help her get in, and when they did, they found Mary, or at least what remained of Mary, which wasn't much. In fact, the only thing left of her was a black ashy stain on her armchair, and her foot, almost completely unburned, still sitting inside one of her black slippers. She'd been basically cremated alive, but other tenants hadn't reported a fire. The landlord had only smelt a faint scent of smoke in the wee hours of the morning, and even stranger, the rest of Mary's apartment was pretty unaffected. There were no burn marks on the walls, there were newspapers nearby which were totally intact. Even the chair, aside from the torched remains of the old woman, was totally fine. You could have just vacuumed her up and sold the thing at a garage sale the very next day. So what the hell happened to Mary? Is this a real case of spontaneous human combustion? Some think so. Others think she may have fallen asleep with a lit cigarette, which caught her clothing on fire, and Mary just never woke up.
Next up, we have the mysterious disappearance of flight MH370, a Malaysian Airlines international passenger flight to China that completely vanished on March 8th in 2014. When the plane took off, everything seemed normal until it disappeared from radar after deviating west from its planned flight path, causing it to cross over the Malay Peninsula and the Andaman Sea, never to be seen again. All 227 passengers and 12 crew members were lost, prompting the most expensive missing person search in the history of aviation. Search teams scoured the South China and Andaman Sea, and later, after new information regarding possible flight paths were revealed, the southern Indian Ocean as well. The last communication with the aircraft had been just 38 minutes after the plane left the ground, and at the time everything seemed fine. And so everyone working on this case was baffled as to how Flight 370 could have just disappeared the way it did. In 2015, debris confirmed to have originated from the missing aircraft washed up along the shore of the western Indian Ocean, but the plane itself, nor those on board, were ever recovered. No one knows why, how, or really even if the plane went down that day in March, and as far as I can tell, no one ever will.
It's not often you hear about dogs intentionally trying to take their own lives, but there's one bridge in Scotland where it certainly seems to happen a lot. So much so that it's often referred to as the Bridge of Death, or a more descriptive nickname that I can't say here on YouTube. It's officially named the Overton Bridge though, in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. For decades, people have reported their dogs mysteriously leaping off the 50-foot bridge to the rocks below. Most of them die, some of them severely injured, but as for why they do it, it's still a mystery, and it's not like people haven't tried to figure figure it out. There have been investigations, including one by the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, but they couldn't find anything conclusive. There are theories. Some have proposed that maybe there's a certain animal that marks its territory in the area that dogs just feel the need to follow. Some have also proposed some kind of paranormal activity in the area that lures the dogs to their deaths. Here's an idea though: don't walk your dog across this bridge.
Next up, we have the very strange death of a very strange man that took place on January 22nd in 1935. That year, a man going by the name of Ronald T. Owen checked into a hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. The next morning, he let the maid, Mary, into the room, which was lit by a single lamp. The drapes were closed and he watched as she cleaned. Before she left, he told her not to lock the door, saying that he was expecting someone. When Mary returned later that day with clean towels, she found Owen laying in the bed in the dark, fully clothed, with a note next to him that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next morning, when she went to clean the room, the door was locked from the outside, so she figured Owen had gone out, but he hadn't. When the hotel staff opened the door, they found him sitting alone in the dark on his bed. Later that night, two men were heard arguing inside the hotel room, and after that, the hotel switchboard operator noticed that Owen's phone was off the hook. A staff member went up to check on him. Owen said come in, but the door was locked again from the outside. Using a passkey, the staff member entered and found Owen alone in the dark, lying naked in his bed. Later that night, the phone went off the receiver again, but this time when staff entered the room, they found Owen on his hands and knees, bound by the phone's cord, with a fractured skull, multiple impalement wounds, and completely covered in BLOOD. Not only that, but the red liquid was everywhere, covering the walls, the floor, the bathtub, and it was even splattered on the ceiling. When Owen was asked who did this to you, he simply said, "No one." He was taken to the hospital where he later died of his injuries. Years later, Owen's true identity was revealed as Armidas Ogletree, but the reason of his death, or who killed him, remains an incredibly perplexing mystery.
Finally, we have the whereabouts of treasure marked on an ancient copper map. So in 1947, a Bedouin goat herder stumbled on the Dead Sea Scrolls in a cave near Jerusalem. Among these ancient texts, one intriguing piece is the Copper Scroll. A copper scroll is a metal sheet inscribed with what looks like a treasure map. Points to hidden gold and silver, but the problem is it's written in a mix of Mishnaionic Hebrew and Greek, and it's filled with words that even experts can't figure out. The scroll lists 63 locations where a whopping total of over 160 tons of treasure might be buried, but the clues are maddeningly vague. There are translations reading about how some is hidden in the quote gutter in the bottom of the tank, or 65 gold bars in the quote cavity of the old house of tribute on the chain platform. Like, what the hell is that in reference to? There are a few guesses about what this treasure could be. Some think it might belong to the residents of Qumran, where the scrolls were found. That would be kinda odd though, because they were thought to be a religious group that didn't really care much for wealth. Another theory suggests the treasure could be valuable items from the destroyed Second Temple of Jerusalem. Some even think though that the scroll could have been an ancient hoax, and that there is and never was any treasure at all. And I hope that's the case, because that is pretty funny. Is there any ocean creature more intimidating and ferocious than the great white shark? The apex predator of the sea? Well, apparently yes. Back in 2003, scientists tagged this massive great white shark. They were studying temperature changes in the ocean. Well, several months passed, and the researchers found the shark's tag washed up on shore in Australia. They took a look at the tag's information, which revealed that about 4 months after they had tagged the shark, it had suddenly plunged 1,900 feet below. There was also a sudden spike in the shark's temperature, so it looked like something had attacked the shark and dragged it down before, putting it in its mouth. So the question was, what the hell had managed to attack and consume a 9-foot great white shark? Now, there are rare cases of cannibal great whites, and there are great white sharks that are much larger than 9 feet, so that was a possibility. Again, that's rare though. Great whites usually don't attack one another. Another possibility is that something else attacked the shark. Something else that we'd never want to run into.
Next Next up, we've got eggs and active volcanoes. In July of 2022, marine researchers decided to explore an ancient deep-sea volcano off Canada's Pacific coastline. And what they found was pretty cool. First of all, they discovered that the 3,600 foot tall volcano, 1,100 meters, was actually still active. And second of all, that it was covered in around 1 million eggs the size of American footballs. What kind of eggs? Skate eggs. And no, I'm not referring to a hockey player's breakfast, but rather a little-known sea creature closely related to sharks and rays. The specific skates on the volcano are Pacific white skates, and they're super cool to look at. These creatures, along with many others living around the volcano, are able to survive and thrive because of the warm, nutrient-rich waters produced by the active volcano. The mystery here is how the hell this thing has stayed active for so long. How did we not know about it until now, and what else is out there? I bet James has some answers.
1968 was not a good year to be in a submarine. That year, 4 subs vanished, all within a relatively short time frame. The subs were the Israeli INS Dakar, the French Minerva, the Soviets K-129, and finally, America's USS Scorpion. Now, we don't know exactly what happened to these submarines, but this was the Cold War, so there's a good chance the fate of the US and Soviet subs had something to do with that. The Israeli sub ceased communication on January 25th of that year though, and the wreckage wasn't found until 1999. And just 2 days after the Israeli sub had originally gone missing, the Minerva vanished in the waters off Toulon in southern France. It was just an hour away from port, and this one wasn't found until 2019.
Next up, we've got the mysterious methane leak of the deep blue sea. Doesn't sound ominous or damning at all. Not. In August of 2022, researchers discovered that a massive amount of methane was bubbling up from the bottom of the deepest point in the Baltic Sea. You know, where the Baltic Sea anomaly that may or may not be an alien spaceship lies. But I digress. The team in charge of monitoring the methane reported that it was, and I quote, basically bubbling everywhere, covering an area of roughly 7.7 square miles or 20 square kilometers, which is around 4,000 soccer fields. And it's all happening at a depth of about 1,300 feet or 400 meters. Whole lot of numbers going on here. Anyways, researchers believe that the methane is coming from a large amount of decaying organic matter lying on the seafloor. But like, there's a lot of methane, so at this point in time, they aren't 100% sure. And they also have absolutely no clue as to why it is rising so high up. So it looks like we've got a mystery on our hands.
Back in 2015, the EV Nautilus, a San Pedro-based research vessel, discovered something pretty insane in the Gulf of Mexico, an incredibly deadly underwater lake 3,300 feet below the surface. It's this pit of high salinity water and dissolved methane, and anything that goes too close doesn't make it out alive. They just get pickled. The underwater lake formed millions of years ago when the area was much shallower and covered in salt beds left behind by evaporating water. Over time, these salt layers got buried under sediments, and the pressure caused cracks, allowing oil, gas, and super salty brine to seep out. This brine is so salty and dense that it doesn't mix well with the surrounding seawater. Instead, it forms its own underwater lakes, rivers, and even waterfalls. And around the edges of this brine pool, mussels really thrive actually. They cling to the mineral deposits, and these mussels have a special relationship with bacteria that live on their gills. The bacteria use gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide, which seep from the ocean floor to produce energy for the mussels. Now, while the mussels can live near the brine pool, the brine itself is extremely toxic to most sea life. It contains very little oxygen and high levels of harmful chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and methane. Any fish or sea creature that ventures into the brine is quickly killed and preserved by the super salty water, which is 4 times saltier than the surrounding ocean. It's really cool. You look at images of this place and there's all these like crabs that have been sitting there for like who knows how long. It's like a graveyard.
Next up, we've got the world's loneliest fish, aka the deepest dwelling fish, which just so happens to look incredibly cool. The species, believed to be an unknown species of snailfish, was discovered in April of last year, 2023. Scientists were able to capture video of the fish feeding in the Izu Ugasawara Trench near Japan at a depth of 27,349 feet. It was a groundbreaking discovery for marine researchers who up until then had only ever seen fish at a depth of about 500 feet above where this species was found. So how the heck do these fish survive at a depth packing such immense pressure that it would cause you and I to crumple up like a shiny ball of tinfoil? Well, I'll tell you. Snailfish are incredibly adaptive, so adaptive in fact that they have replaced their scales with a gelatinous layer that helps to absorb the pressure. And their chemical makeup has adapted to protect their cells from the pressure as well, so they're pretty much set. But it begs the question of whether or not we find an even deeper fish with even more gelatinous bits next year. Here's hoping.
Can't do a deep sea mystery video without mentioning at least one shipwreck, and this one is very intriguing because it seemed like there was some sort of bad energy attached to it. In the Gulf of Mexico, once again, there's a shipwreck that seems to bring nothing but bad luck to anyone who tries to explore it. ExxonMobil discovered this wreck while laying down a pipeline, and that was the last bit of good fortune they had near the site. When a team was put together to check out the wreck, everything started going wrong. Their exploration submarine malfunctioned just as it was about to dive. Problems ranged from video monitors failing every time they turned on the thrusters, to the sonar breaking down and the hydraulics going crazy, one after another. Then the Navy got involved and sent their own research submarine. This sub had its own set of issues as well. It pretty much destroyed its own rover as soon as it hit the water, and when it finally reached the wreck, its robotic arms were too short to grab anything of use. And these are just a few examples of the long list of failed attempts to explore the wreck. It seems like anyone who tries to get close to it is doomed to fail in some bizarre or frustrating way.
Next up, we have some unusual behaviors being displayed by a new mother. In June of 2022, marine researchers witnessed something they had never seen before while tracking a female squid who had just given birth in the waters of Monterey Bay, California. The mama squid was observed carrying her babies. Why is this strange? Well, because up until now, squids have only ever been observed abandoning their babies. Not in a CPS way though, it's just not in their nature to care for their young. And it has always been believed that once a squid lays its eggs, it leaves them to develop on their own. But of course, now there is video evidence proving that that is not always the case. Scientists observing the behavior speculated that maybe the mother was spooked, perhaps by the remotely controlled rover used to observe her, and she felt as though she needed to take extra precaution to ensure the safety of her offspring. But at the end of the day, they didn't ask her, so we really don't know the answer.
We've all heard about the legend of Atlantis. Well, Japan may have an Atlantis of its very own, Yanuguni Monument. This mysterious structure was discovered in 1986 by diver Kihachiro Aretake off the coast of Yanuguni Island in Japan. It's been heavily debated as to whether this place was naturally forming or not ever since. It's located about 60 feet beneath the ocean's surface. The monument consists of these massive stone blocks arranged in a way that really does look like it was done deliberately. You see what look like terraces and steps, all these columns and walls. The main structure is something that almost looks like a pyramid. This was why it's known as the Yanuguni Monument. And ever since these formations were first discovered, there's been this idea floating around, no pun intended, that the Yanuguni Monument is part of the remnants of a sunken city belonging to some prehistoric advanced civilization, like the lost continent of Mu, for example, dating back around 10,000 years. Mu's existence has never been 100% verified, and it's kind of in the same vein as Atlantis or Lemuria, but folks like university professor and researcher Masaki Kimura believe that the precision and arrangement of the stone blocks go far beyond what could occur naturally, and that these formations are likely from an ancient human settlement now submerged beneath the waves. But there are plenty of skeptics on the other side who say that it's all just formed naturally. They argue that the formations are more likely a result of some tectonic activity, erosion. People are just looking too deeply into it. Pareidolia, you know, we look at things we don't understand and we go, oh, that looks like a house or a column of some kind, stairs. Well, I don't know. Personally, I look at these photos and I I don't know, those look like stairs to me. But what do you guys all think?
And finally, to finish us off today, we have the mystery that is, how the hell are animals able to survive and actually thrive on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, aka the GPGP? In 2018, while studying debris collected from what is essentially a floating island made of garbage, two scientists noticed something strange. Very tiny marine animals, including crabs and anemones, animals that are normally seen on beaches and along the coast. So how the heck did they end up all the way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? No one actually knows. As a general rule of thumb, the open ocean is not at all a suitable environment for small animals such as crabs and anemones because there is not a lot of shelter to help them defend against predators. But now, all of a sudden, it seems as though these small animals have found shelter in our old bottle caps and chip bags. But again, how did they get there? Because surely these animals would not have been able to swim all the way out into the open ocean and then all the way up to the garbage patch. And yet it appears as though a whole new thriving ecosystem does very much exist there. Of course, it's possible that these animals latched onto the plastic when it first entered the ocean and then held on for months as it journeyed out to the GPGP, but again, that doesn't really line up with previously observed behaviors. Really, the whole thing is just one big what's going on to science and scientists. Starting off our list today, we have the disappearance and death of Kyle Marissa Roth. Kyle Marissa was a TikToker whose content consisted of blind items, insider knowledge that exposed celebrities and some of society's highest elites for acting malevolently. Prior to her death, the TikToker had posted a series of videos she claimed exposed both P. Diddy and Oprah, along with many other celebrities connected to the pair for their mistreatment of young men, which she claims were used by Diddy for adult favors. Shortly after posting the videos, they were taken down from her main page, and so naturally, wanting to expose the misbehavior of Diddy and others, she reposted them on her second account, and also claims that the information provided was sent in by victims to news outlets in an effort to bring awareness to the situation and to put pressure on the police to act. In April of 2024, shortly after the videos were posted, Kyle Marissa Roth was found dead after her parents called for a welfare check on the 36-year-old. No cause of death was given for the influencer, leading the public to speculate on what actually happened and if her untimely demise might have had something to do with the videos she was posting in the days leading up to her passing. Next up, we have Andrew Dawson, a TikToker who exposed the government and then paid the ultimate price: death. In 2022, the TikToker with over 56,000 followers posted a video of what appeared to be a giant standing on top of a mountain in Canada. That video was then followed up with an explanation video in which the TikToker stated that he had been removed from the premises after capturing the video by agents working for the American Central Intelligence Agency and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and that he was now being stalked by both of the organizations, and he was quite worried for his safety. He continued to maintain the story until one day, seemingly out of the blue, he uploaded a video explaining that he had made everything up. Although in the video it appears as though his confession is being coerced by someone off camera, which is likely as just 10 days later, he uploaded another video rescinding his confession and stating a very real fear for his life. One day after that, he posted another video at the base of the same mountain where he had originally seen the giant, but this time it appeared as though a military base had suddenly popped up on the mountain's peak. After that, the TikTok account went dark, and 2 months later, his obituary was posted by a local news outlet. How he died remains unknown, or whether or not he really did, or who might have killed him. I literally have goosebumps, you guys. Next up, we have TikTok user Jenna Talia, who disappeared without a trace for 26 years. The user took to TikTok to share the story of how she discovered that her parents were not who she thought they were and that she had in fact been a missing person since 1980. After discovering that she was not the biological child of the woman who raised her, and in an attempt to find her birth mother, Jenna decided to contact the local sheriff's office in the town in which she was born, and when she did, she got so much more than she bargained for. The sheriff told her that when she was younger, her grandmother had reported her missing after her birth mother had given her away to another family in exchange for financial gain. I couldn't find any information as to whether or not the TikToker ever got to meet meet any of her biological family members, but she did make it clear that her mother was not a good person and that she would have not been safe had she stayed with her. Unfortunately, her adoptive parents were no better. They were actually quite terrible. But it seems as though Jenna is doing much better now, and I have to say I do wish her well. Next up, into cups and bowls, and sometimes those cups get yeeted, hence the name the Yeet Baby. In August of last year, 2023, Chris was absent from the platform and people began to wonder what had happened. Eventually, he returned and provided his fans with an explanation for his absence. He revealed that his reason behind taking a break from TikTok was so that he could take some time to focus on his mental well-being. After suffering from poor mental health following his divorce, he had checked himself into a mental health facility. While this can be a difficult thing to share online, Chris was quite candid about his experience, stating, "Unfortunately, there was nothing anyone could do to help me. It is something that I have to work on, and I am going to make it my life's mission to not only get myself healthy, but also others." Keep it up, Chris. Now this next one's a little bit different, because instead of a TikToker disappearing without a trace, we have a man who disappeared without a trace, only to reappear years later in a TikTok video. On December 26th of 2016, Suresh walked out on his wife, Jayaprada, their son, and their daughter. He left no trace and no clues as to where he might have gone. 3 years went by, and Jayaprada began to believe that she might never again see her husband. That is until a family member sent her a TikTok video. A TikTok video in which her husband can be clearly seen dancing to popular music. Jayaprada immediately went down to the police station for assistance. It didn't take them long to track down Suresh, who was, at the time of being located, in a relationship with another woman. However, when the police contacted him, he agreed to come home to his wife and their kids. I'm not really sure if this story had a happy ending, but at least Jaya no longer has to worry about whether or not her husband is alive or dead, although at this point she might wish he was dead. Doubling down on people who disappeared but were then found because of TikTok, we have Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner. One day, 3 TikTokers went down to Seattle Beach where they discovered a suitcase. You might have seen this one online. It actually gained a lot of traction. Curious, they opened the suitcase, and inside they found much more than anyone could have ever expected. Body parts. They immediately contacted police, who arrived on the scene to discover another bag filled with body parts in the area. An investigation was opened into who the 2 people were, and it was discovered that the bodies belonged to Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner, a couple living near Seattle. It turns out they had been killed by their landlord after a dispute had broken out over unpaid rent. The landlord, Michael Dudley, was sentenced to 46 years in prison for the death of the pair. I think it's worth mentioning that while the investigations were taking place, the video of the suitcase's discovery was posted on TikTok, and it amassed countless views despite its graphic content. I really don't understand how people can be so numb to social understanding, but to the person who posted the video and then refused to take it down because they chose likes and views over the family of the deceased's feelings, do better. Next up, we have the disappearance of Spidey Turin, a TikTok live streamer who in January of this year disappeared literally without a trace while visiting Phuket, Thailand. The live streamer is best known for his travel stories, confrontational behavior, and plant-based substance use, if you know what I mean. In his last live, he spoke about looking for a place to smoke and briefly mentioned something about a girlfriend. After that, nothing. Radio silence. He was last seen reportedly acting erratically in the streets of Phuket, but no one knows where he might have gone, where he is now, or what could have happened to him. But there are some theories. Many people online believe that he is either in the hospital being treated for mental illness, in jail, that he has been taken and is being held against his will and will likely be sold for some kind of services, or that he is dead. And that's really all the information that's out there right now. Hopefully he turns up soon unharmed and he will eventually be reunited with his family, but unfortunately right now we just don't know if that will ever be the case. Okay, so this next guy didn't disappear without a trace, but he is most certainly not going to be posting any TikToks anytime soon. It's Ali Abulaban, who ended the lives of both his wife Anna and her friend after he began suspecting the two of engaging in an affair. At the time of the pair's death, Ali had amassed nearly 1 million followers on TikTok. His content often revolved around his wife and their relationship, which he portrayed online as happy, loving, and drama-free. The two were often seen partaking in trends and dancing around their shared home. But in October of 2021, things turned dark when Ali went off the deep end and secured the fate of both his wife and her friend Cadenas, as well as his own fate. But here's the thing. Prior to the incident, Anna and Ali had actually separated, and Ali had been asked to move out of the home, so even if she was hooking up with her friend, they weren't together. Anyways, he did move out of the home, but he later snuck back in. He trashed the place and then planted a recording device in he and Anna's daughter's tablet to record any conversations that Anna might be having. That night, Anna invited her friend over, and after hearing his soon-to-be ex-wife giggling over the recording device, Ali went over to the home and fired a projectile out of a handheld weapon at the pair, killing them both before calling the police. He was arrested for the crime and charged with killing his wife and Cadenas. He is currently awaiting trial. And you know what? Why not double down on vicious TikTokers who committed unspeakable atrocities by talking about Claire Miller, who at the height of her TikTok career had a following of about 33,000 and who also killed her sister. Miller's content, which was somewhat popular on the social media platform, mainly consisted of videos of herself and her family lip syncing and dancing to popular audios on the app. But the last video she posted was entirely different, super creepy, and super messed up. It was a video of a white glove covered in thick red liquid sitting outside in the snow, along with a stuffed giraffe absolutely soaked in the same red liquid, which strongly resembles both the color and consistency of BLOOD. Now, I had actually seen this video on TikTok before, but it wasn't until I began actually researching Claire Miller that I realized the dark reality behind it. It turns out the night that the video was taken and posted, Claire had walked into the room of her sister Helen, a woman living with Down syndrome, and impaled her in the chest and neck multiple times before going outside, taking the video, and then calling police to turn herself in. In relation to the crime, she was given a sentence of 12.5 to 40 years in prison.
We're going to start off the list with a disturbing and mysterious online game called Sad Satan. So Sad Satan is this creepy game that popped up on the internet in 2015. Now, I haven't played it myself, but I've seen videos of people playing it, and having heard the story behind it, it's definitely one of the creepiest games on the internet. I describe it as haunted. It's all in black and white. You maneuver your character through these strange environments, and these incredibly disturbing images will intermittently flash on the screen, some of which people say are real images of dead bodies and worse things, if you can imagine that. People who played it felt seriously disturbed by what they saw and heard, but even stranger, nobody knew where the game came from or who made it. At least not the person's real identity, anyway. It's said to have been created by someone on the dark web. going by the name of ZK. One version of the game ended up on a YouTube channel called Obscure Horror Corner, but even then folks weren't sure if it was the real game or some made-up version for views. Till this day, nobody's really cracked the mystery of who's behind Sad Satan.
Next up, we have the mystery of the Jack Froze emails. In June of 2011, Jack Froze died unexpectedly of a heart attack at the age of 32. His friends and family were shocked, but even more so after they began receiving emails that appeared to be coming from Jack himself 5 months after his death. In particular, Jack's friend Tim Hart received many emails that appeared to be written by Jack. How so? They came from Jack's personal email account and included personal details about the two men's relationship. The first email Tim received simply said, "I'm watching," but then the next email read, "Do you hear me? I'm at your house, clean your effing attic." It was the mention of the attic that really made it clear that whoever or whatever was doing this had to have been listening to one of the final conversations Tim had had with Jack the second to last time Jack had visited Tim's home before his death. The two had gone up to hang out in Tim's attic, as they often did, and they joked about how dirty it was, and Froze even said that he would clean it himself. Curious, Tim replied to the email, but there was no response. In another instance, Jack sent an email to his cousin, Jimmy McCraw, saying, "Hey Jim, how you doing? I knew you would break your ankle. Tried to warn you." Unlike the attic comment that took place during Jack's life and was kind of like an inside joke that only those two would know about, Jimmy broke his ankle long after his cousin's death. So how did he know that? How did the email get to these men from Jack's account, including these kind of personal informations? I don't know, you guys. Do you have any theories?
Next, we have the most mysterious song on the internet. So this is a song I was listening to actually a lot last summer when I first found out about this story. It's pretty catchy, you know, like the wind, you can't hear us. Nobody knows who this song is by. So this is a track that was recorded from a German radio station in the early 80s. The song was taped by a young man going by the name of Darius S. off the northern German radio station NDR. He recorded it onto a cassette tape along with other songs by bands like The Cure and Ecstasy. Years later, he pulled out the tape and noticed there was one song he didn't recognize. So he did what anyone does nowadays. He took it to the internet. Surely someone would know where this song came from, but nobody had any idea what this song was. It's become a total cult internet mystery. There have been people who have tried to claim the song belongs to them. One guy posted in a YouTube comment that it was from his band Numb 212. It's never been confirmed, and I honestly don't buy it. Numb 212, that's not the kind of name an 80s new wave band would have had, and there's never been any solid proof that the song belongs to him. All we know is that the singer seems to have a vaguely European accent, possibly German, and we can pick out some of the lyrics. Again, great song.
Next on our list today, we have Grave Robbing for Morons, a video that appeared on the internet out of nowhere and doesn't really make a lot of sense. The video was shot on VHS, and it shows a man, presumably in his early 20s, sitting in a basement, wearing a leather jacket and holding a skull while being surrounded by human bones, while explaining how to rob a grave. And while some of the advice given by the young man appears to be contradictory and inaccurate, the majority of the explanation surprisingly makes a good amount of sense. As much as it can, I guess. The whole concept is ridiculous. However, many bone experts, whatever that means, who have seen the video online said that the bones showed by the young man looked to be incredibly authentic, and they even identified the skull in the man's hand, which he claims to have acquired during his second grave robbing, belonging to a female, age unknown. No one knows where the video came from, which many people believe was filmed in 1987. But again, no one knows who filmed it, where it was filmed, why it was filmed, and at this point in time, I'm not really sure if we'll ever get any answers, but feel free to go ahead and leave me your best guess, as always, in the comments.
This next one is pretty cool, Cicada 3301. It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside of another mystery on the internet. So it all began back in January of 2012 when this weird puzzle popped up out of nowhere. It was a challenge posted to several online forums across different websites reading, "Hello, we are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we devised a test. There is a message hidden in this message. Find it, and it will lead you on the road to finding us. We look forward to meeting the few that will make it all the way through. Good luck, 3301. So some brainy users started deciphering this message that then led to more and more crazy complex puzzles. People who took up the challenge found themselves digging into cryptography, steganography, literature, who knows what else. I wish I was smart, so I could have uncovered the puzzle and started down like this adventure. Like, 'cause some folks claimed they had to go on real world like treasure hunts to crack these puzzles. Like, they'd get clues leading to the physical locations around the globe. Like, very exciting. Of course, nobody knows who's behind Cicada 3301 or what they're up to. Some think it's maybe some kind of recruitment test for like a super secret organization, maybe the CIA or something. Others think that maybe there's something more nefarious and dark going on, but who knows? And we don't even know if anyone completed the entire thing.
Okay guys, go ahead and tell James that he's smart in the comments, come on. Next up we have the mystery of Chip Chan, who is a South Korean woman who first appeared online as a YouTube live streamer and who often slept on said live stream for upwards of 20 hours at a time, and she only ever left her house in disguise. People became fascinated by her strange day-to-day behaviors, and eventually the live streaming evolved into blogging. And that's when things began to get even weirder, and quite dark too. Chip Chan claimed that the South Korean police had been mistreating her, and one specific police officer, who she referred to only as Pig or P, had been specifically targeting her and making her life an unbearable living hell. Chip Chan claims that whenever she left her house, the officer would make her unconscious and drag her to an unknown location before implanting a chip into her ankle that she believed to be a mind control device. In another blog post, she shared a picture of her neck covered in bug bites. I mean, like, covered. It was pretty gross. And she claimed that the officer, P, had used mind control on the bugs to make them attack her. About 4 years ago, her streams ended, and she made a blog post saying that it was because P had shut her down, but then eventually the blog stopped too. While there are many theories going around regarding the truth about what really happened to Chip Chan, many people believe that she was in fact a paranoid schizophrenic who had refused help. Perhaps she stopped posting after being admitted to a mental hospital, or do you guys think what she was saying is true and maybe the police finally got to her?
Alright, next up we have a mysterious Russian radio station that's been sending out strange signals since the 70s, and people all over the internet have been trying to figure out what the deal is with it for years. The station broadcasts this monotonous buzzing noise interrupted by weird cryptic messages in Russian. Take a listen here. So people have been trying to decode this radio station for years, but they're often just random strings of numbers or disjointed words or names, like you just heard. Other than like the intermittent voices cutting into the buzzing, there was also a transmission in 2010 where there was a brief excerpt from Swan Lake, and on the 11th of November of that same year, intermittent phone conversations were transmitted and recorded by a listener. Again, most anyone has been able to like piece together are just random phrases and words. Some think they're coded messages for spies or secret military communications. Until this day though, nobody knows who's behind UVB 76 or why it exists.
Raise your hand if you are the founder of Bitcoin. Now, if you raise your hand, you are either a liar or one of the most mysterious internet icons on Earth. When the cryptocurrency launched back on January 3rd of 2009, it quickly became, I think, the most successful and prominent cryptocurrency known to man. I mean, in 2021, it reached a market value of over $1 trillion US dollars. Do you know what I could do with that amount of money? I could buy a lot of stuff. So, while Bitcoin launched in 2009, it was actually mentioned online a year prior in a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The paper appeared to be written by someone or something called Satoshi Nakamoto, but no one knows who that is, or who they are, or what they are. It could be one person, a small group, a whole team, or even some kind of like AI generated thing. No one knows. What we do know, however, is that in 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared after emailing a Bitcoin core developer saying that he had, quote, moved on to better things. Many people have speculated that Australian scientist Craig Wright or BitGold founder Nick Szabo might have been the man or men behind the whole thing, but the truth is, unless you are Satoshi Nakamoto, There's just no way to know though.
Alright, next up we have the mystery of 112 Dirtbag. Mara Murray was a 21-year-old college student who vanished without a trace in February of 2004 after crashing her car in a rural road in Haverhill, New Hampshire. She was last seen by witnesses after the accident, but when police arrived on the scene just minutes later, she was gone. Now enter 112 Dirtbag. So Mara's father in an interview dubbed whoever was responsible for his daughter's perceived kidnapping as a quote dirtbag. On the 8th anniversary of her vanishing, a chilling YouTube video surfaced on a channel named 112 Dirtbag. In the video, a middle-aged man stares into the camera with this unsettling seriousness before breaking into this maniacal laughter. Then he winks at the camera before the screen goes black and the message, "Happy Anniversary," appears on screen. Not only could the dirtbag part be a reference to the comment Mara's father made, but she'd also gone missing on Route 112. Police were able to trace the man's identity in the video, but there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. The question still remains though, was this guy just a troll, exploiting the tragedy for attention, or could he actually have been involved in Mara's disappearance?
And finally we have GhostNet, an electronic espionage operation that came to light in 2009 that had infiltrated 1,295 computers across 103 countries. The operation had been used to spy on individuals as well as organizations and governments, and it went on for 2 years before it was discovered after an investigation had been launched into a potential breach in the office of the Dalai Lama in India. It was investigators from the University of Toronto, shout out my Canadians, who confirmed the cyber spy attack, and they were also able to trace its origins back to China. It was noted that while the exact source of the espionage was unknown, the acting attackers were likely civilians who had run the operation for either profit or patriotic reasons. Or it was the government acting as private citizens in order to spy on other countries while maintaining plausible deniability for their actions? Who knows, right? I mean, do you know? Because like, if you know, let me know, you know?
We're starting off the list with the English sweating sickness. Gross. I've got sweating sickness. I'm so damp. This was a mysterious illness that spread across England a few different times during the Tudor period. Symptoms would be high fever with intense amounts of sweating. But what was really scary about this illness is that it would come on very suddenly, and within a couple hours you'd be dead, having just sweat to death. Outbreaks would happen sporadically between 1485 and 1551, and then that was just it. It's not because they found a cure. I mean, come on, have you ever read about medicine from back then? It just stopped being a thing for whatever reason. And what's also really strange about this sickness was that aside from one outbreak, the sickness only seemed to affect people who were native to England. Wealthy males seemed to be hit the hardest, and it mostly struck in rural populations rather than urban ones, like with most illnesses. The cause of the English sweating sickness is still unknown, and I kinda hope it stays that way, because the only real way we'd learn more about this would be if it came back.
The lead masks case. This case revolves around the mysterious deaths of 2 Brazilian electronic technicians, Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, whose bodies were discovered on August 20th, 1966 on a remote hilltop near Rio de Janeiro. The scene was absolutely perplexing. The bodies were found side by side, dressed in formal suits, wearing lead eye masks, and covered in grass, with no apparent signs of struggle or trauma. Nearby authorities found an empty water bottle, wet towels, and a cryptic notebook containing instructions. The men, identified as Cruz and Viana, had left their hometown days earlier, supposedly to purchase work materials. Witnesses reported seeing them behaving anxiously before they vanished. Despite extensive investigation, the cause of their deaths remains unknown. The case has sparked various theories, of course, including foul play, overdose linked to their involvement in, quote, scientific spiritualism, or even encounters with extraterrestrial beings. However, conclusive evidence has yet to be found, leaving the lead masks case an unsettling, unsolved mystery.
Where on earth is William Kidd's treasure? Historians have been asking that question for centuries. Any One Piece fans in the audience, you're gonna like this story. So William Kidd was born in 1654. He was a Scottish sailor turned privateer. At first, he'd been employed by the British government to hunt pirates, but he soon turned pirate himself. In 1699, he was accused of piracy and was facing death by hanging. In an attempt to plead for his life, he sent a letter to the British government saying that he'd reveal the location of mass amounts of treasure that he'd plundered from various ships over the years, but they refused his offer and he was arrested and hanged. But word got out amongst other pirates that Kidd's treasure was buried somewhere, and hunts were launched. This was basically the real-life One Piece, and it still is, because till this day, the treasure's never been found. There have been some clues, though. In 2007, just off Catalina Island, the wreck of the Kadar Merchant was found. This was the ship that Kidd got in trouble for plundering, leading to his being labeled as a pirate. It was pretty amazing to find a ship that Captain Kidd himself had stolen and then abandoned. Unfortunately, though, they didn't find the treasure along with it.
Step back in time to 1901 in Montreal's swanky Golden Square. Imagine here a grand mansion home to the wealthy Redpath family. Then, a bombshell. Both socialite Ada Redpath and her son Clifford are found tragically deceased in their private chambers. The only sign of a struggle? A single, silent firearm. But here's the real head scratcher. The investigation vanished faster than a magician's rabbit. No official police probe, just a lightning quick inquiry held right there in the mansion. Within 48 hours, the Redpaths were buried, leaving whispers echoing in the empty halls. Was it a heartbreaking family tragedy, as the inquiry concluded, perhaps Clifford succumbing to a sudden episode, or was there a darker secret lurking beneath the surface? The Redpath family's wealth and the cloak of secrecy surrounding the investigation fueled a firestorm of speculation that continues to burn even today. This real-life whodunit with a dash of high society Montreal remains a captivating puzzle that may never really be solved.
Where are the bones of the Peking Man? In 1923, scientists made a groundbreaking discovery in a cave near Beijing, the fossilized bones of a new hominin species known as Peking Man, a subspecies of Homo erectus. It was the first real physical evidence of early human presence in China. The bones were estimated to be between 250 to 500,000 years old. There were 5 complete skulls, various other bones, but during World War II, China was invaded by Japan, and in 1941, during all this chaos, the bones disappeared. One story goes that there was an attempt to ship the Peking Man fossils to the United States, like to keep them safe, but they were lost at sea when the ship carrying them sank. Others speculate they might still be buried somewhere in China, though.
Next up today on our list, we have the Pollock sisters. So believe it or not, but over a quarter of Americans subscribe to the idea of reincarnation. While science might scoff at the notion, sometimes real life throws us mysteries so bizarre that even the most skeptical minds can't help but scratch their heads. Enter the story of the Pollock sisters. In 1957, tragedy struck the Pollock family in England when their 2 daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, perished in a car accident. A year later, a miracle, or perhaps something spookier, occurred when Mrs. Pollock gave birth to twins, Jillian and Jennifer. As the twins grew old enough to talk, things got strange. They started asking for their past sisters' toys, recognizing landmarks their sisters would have known, like a specific school, or even freaking out around idling cars, once yelling, "That car is coming to get us." Could you just imagine your kid just screaming that? No, horrible. Sorry, that just got me. These spooky occurrences faded as the girls turned 5, and they went on to live normal lives, but the story wouldn't stay buried. It reached Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychologist fascinated by reincarnation. After investigating thousands of cases, Dr. Stevenson documented 14 that he deemed credible, including the Pollock sisters. So if you're looking for a good paranormal shiver, this true story and the many unsolved science mysteries out there might just do the trick.
The Plain of Jars. So in northern Laos is a mysterious archaeological site called the Plain of Jars. It's thousands of massive stone jars, some towering up to 10 feet tall and weighing tons. They're covered in lichen and carved from sandstone. The big question though is, what were these things used for? There are legends that giants once used these jars as wine glasses. As for why they were actually crafted though, some archaeologists think they were possibly used for burial practices. Others think they could have been used as storage vessels or in ancient rituals and ceremonies, but those are just ideas. We don't even really know about the civilization that created them, because you see, the jars date back as far as 1240 BC, making them much older than all the human remains found nearby. It's also really tough to study these ancient artifacts because of all the unexploded munitions from the Vietnam War in the surrounding area.
Next on our list today we have Amy Robsart. Amy Robsart, the first wife of Queen Elizabeth I's favorite, Robert Dudley, wasn't known for a life of royal luxury. Stuck in the countryside while her ambitious husband climbed the court ladder, she was more likely to be found managing their estate than attending glamorous events. Then, in 1560, tragedy struck. Amy was found dead at the foot of a staircase in her residence, Cumnor Place. Here's the real kicker. The cause of death? A broken neck. Officially, it was ruled an accident. Tumble down the stairs. But whispers of foul play swirled like smoke. Was it a tragic misstep or something more sinister? The timing was very suspicious, with Amy's death conveniently removing a roadblock to Robert's potential marriage to the Queen. The lack of proper investigation and Robert's hasty return to court after the incident only fueled the rumors. Did Amy fall, or was she pushed? These questions surrounding her death continue to be a historical mystery, a question mark in the story of Elizabeth I's reign.
Alright, I had to get at least one cryptid on the list. We got the Monkey Man of New Delhi. Now, this happened in very recent history, but it's pretty interesting as a cryptid case because there were so many reports. In May of 2001 in New Delhi, all these reports started coming in about a strange creature known as the Monkey Man. It would attack people at night. It was most commonly described as being a monkey-like creature, hence the name, around 4 to 5 feet tall, wearing a metal helmet, and it had claws. It was also said to have glowing red eyes. And even weirder, some people would say it even wore roller skates. It was also said to be capable of leaping from building to building. Also, it's just really weird. That's a real interesting mix of items and appearances. Monkey, roller skates, but also jumps, has claws. Over 350 sightings were reported, and around 60 resulted in very real injuries. This wasn't just some big ape creature off in the distance in the woods, minding its own business. This thing was attacking people, but there were also accidents. There were reports of people falling from buildings or down stairwells while frantically trying to escape from the thing. But eventually sightings died down, but the Monkey Man was never caught. Was it an actual half man, half monkey monster, or was it just a maniac in a costume? Probably the latter, but still, he was never caught.
Imagine a sleepy French village perched on a hilltop. Now sprinkle in a charismatic priest with a penchant for renovations, whispers of secret societies, and a dash of potential hidden riches. That's the recipe for the enduring mystery of the Rennes-le-Château treasure. The story kicks off in the 19th century with the parish priest. He undertook extensive renovations on the village church, funded by sources that remain murky. These renovations included peculiar symbols and statues, fueling rumors of hidden messages and clues. Legends arose of the priest discovering lost Templar riches or uncovering secret documents related to the Holy Grail. Despite extensive searches, no definitive treasure has ever been found. Some believed the priest's renovations were simply financed by savvy investments or by selling religious relics, yet the allure of the hidden persists. The story has captivated treasure hunters, authors, and conspiracy theorists for over a century. So, is there really a treasure in Rennes-le-Château? The answer, much like the village itself, remains shrouded in mystery.
And we're starting off the list with the town of Holman in Wisconsin. This small village has a story about one of the wildest cryptids in the United States, the man-bat. Unfortunately, it's not Batman. This is a large, half-man, half-bat looking creature, far less friendly. Actually, there is a man-bat in the actual Batman. It's a bit more like that, the villain, the scary monster guy. So this story goes that on a September night in 2006, a father and son had a terrifying run-in with what they described as a man-bat while driving down Briggs Road at night. Traveling in their truck, the pair spotted a massive figure hurtling towards them in the darkness. The father swerved to try and avoid colliding with the thing, and the creature abruptly changed course, flying up into the sky with a piercing shriek. Now, immediately afterward, both men were overcome by this sudden and severe illness, forcing them to pull over and vomit. Now, some say that has something to do with the creature. I don't know, it was maybe emitting something into the air. I just think they saw something really wild and it was overwhelming. I'd probably be barfing after seeing something like that. A giant winged creature flying towards my car. I almost just died. They described the creature to authorities, saying it was 6 to 7 feet tall with leathery bat-like wings, clawed appendages, and glowing yellow eyes. Some speculate that this bat creature could somehow be linked to the infamous Mothman, or that it's potentially even just the same creature.
Next up, we've got Saxtown, more like Axtown, a small town located just outside of Millstadt in Illinois. In 1847, the town was comprised of mostly German immigrants, and on March 19th of that same year, one of them, Fritz Stelzeride, was killed. After responding to a knock on the front door of his farmhouse, he was struck down with an axe. The killer then entered the home and killed his father, his mother, his grandfather, and his siblings, all with the same weapon. The bodies were found by Stelzeride's neighbor, who got suspicious when he didn't see anyone working on the farm that day. He discovered the disheveled bodies with their throats gouged from end to end. No one knows who the killer was or what their motivation was for ending the lives of an entire family in such a gruesome way. One theory, however, is that the family had been hiding gold on the property, but this was never proved because the existence or the absence of the money was never proved. Another theory is that a family member did the killing so that they would become the sole heir to the inheritance, a theory backed by the fact that after the killings, the one remaining member of the family who had not been on the farm that day, as far as we know, fled the country and changed his name. But again, if someone is targeting Stelzerides, it's probably best not to be one, so his logic could come from somewhere else.
Moving on to Woodland Park in Teller County, Colorado. Now, we have a very unsettling and tragic case involving a young man named Joshua Maddox. So in 2008, a man named Chuck Murphy was demolishing his old wood cabin when he came across something incredibly disturbing. It was the remains of Joshua Maddox, a young man who had been missing for 7 years at that point. He'd been stuck in the chimney. Now, it's pretty obvious that he died in the chimney, but there's always been this mystery as to why he was in there in the first place. Joshua was last seen alive in May of 2008 when he left his family's home to take a walk, but he never returned. Joshua seemed to have vanished without a trace. Then, in 2015, he was found lodged in the chimney of the cabin. This was the last place anyone was expecting to find him, which is why he was found completely by accident. So now people were wondering what happened to him during those years that he was missing. Some think there may have been foul play involved, that someone had forced him into that chimney. Others think he'd just been maybe up on the roof of the cabin for whatever reason and then had an accident.
Next up, we have the mystery of the Below killings, which took place in Windsor, North Carolina in 1993, back when the town had a population of just 4,000 people. So small, yes. Mysterious, also yes. On June 6, a man armed with various weapons entered the local Below grocery after hours. There were 6 employees in the building, all doing their closing duties when the man arrived, and using his handheld projectile weapon, he led them all into the meat cutting room in the back. He bound their hands with duct tape and then stacked the employees 2 by 2 before firing his weapons at all 6. He then grabbed a meat cleaver and used it to impale the bodies numerous times, again and again, until the blade actually broke off into one of the victims' backs. Super disgusting, but surprisingly, after the attack, one of the victims was able to break free and call the police. Even more surprising, 3 of the employees actually survived the attack as well. The surviving employees were able to give a description location of the man to police, but neither could figure out who committed the heinous crime, why, and where they are now. But the police did say it was malicious and thought out. There's currently a $30,000 reward for any information that can lead to the arrest of the assailant, so if you know anything, give the Windsor, North Carolina police a call and leave a comment.
Next on the list is the Jamison family case. In October of 2009, Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilyn, and their daughter Madison disappeared from their home in Oklahoma. They were last seen alive on their home surveillance system footage, making trips between their vehicle and their home, packing to leave, in what authorities described as this very odd, almost trance-like state. Their abandoned truck was discovered days later in Latimer County, Oklahoma, with their malnourished dog inside and important belongings like their ID cards, their wallets, phones, a GPS system, and a large stack of cash. The family had been considering purchasing a plot of land nearby at the time of their disappearance, but it wasn't until November of 2013 that the skeletal remains of 2 adults and their daughter were found by hunters in a remote area of Latimer County, less than 3 miles from where the truck was abandoned. The remains were confirmed to belong to the Jamison family. The exact cause of death couldn't be determined because of how advanced the decomposition was, so the case is still completely unsolved.
Next up, we have the mystery of the vanishing Iowa town of Urkhammer. In 1928, the town was small but thriving. It was well kept and growing. The grass was always mowed, the roads were always clean, and ever so often new buildings would pop up as well. Pretty normal town, right? Well, things started to get weird when an aerial photo taken of the town painted an almost opposite picture of what could be seen from the point of view of someone on the ground. The town looked abandoned and disheveled. The grass looked overgrown and unkempt. A weird photo is weird, but many people did their best to believe that the image was the result of a messed up camera lens or something of the sort. But then things got weirder. During a road trip, an American man had stopped to fill up his gas tank in the town, but when he drove away, he realized that his tank had never been filled up, and so he drove back to get the gas that he paid for. He ran out of gas before he could reach the town, but he could see it and it didn't look far, so he got out of his car and began walking and walking and walking. He never made it. No one knows what happened to the town. Some believe it chipped away bit by bit, and others claim that it vanished into thin air out of the blue one afternoon.
Alright, next we have the case of Jessica Chambers. This one is pretty distressing. So this happened in Cortland, Mississippi. It's still one of the most baffling cases in the state. Just after 8 p.m. on December 6th, 2014, the body of a burning woman was found next to her car, which was also on fire. It was Jessica Chambers. She was still alive and told first responders that a man named Eric, or Derek, had set her on fire. She was rushed to the hospital where she died the following morning from her burns. Now here are the events that led up to her being found. She spent the morning with friends before heading to her mother Lisa's house, where she took a nap. Later in the afternoon, she received a text message and left her mother's house, mentioning that she was going to grab something to eat and clean out her car. Around 5:30 p.m., Jessica was spotted at a gas station, approximately 1.5 miles from where her body would later be discovered. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Location data from her phone indicated that she'd traveled to nearby Batesville around 6 p.m. She returned to Cortland around 6:30 p.m. At about 6:45, she made a call to her mother, who noted that the call was unusually quiet. This was just 15 minutes before Jessica drove to the area where her body was found. At 7:30 p.m., she arrived at the location where, tragically, she lost her life about 30 minutes later. Nobody knew who this Eric or Derek could have been. Everyone with those names in the surrounding area was questioned, but they were all ruled out. The case is still a complete mystery.
Next up, we have the Gurdon Light, which can be found in Gurdon, Arkansas, or Arkansas if you're James. He'll never live that down, guys. The light appears floating over the town's railroad tracks. It's eerie, ominous, and it glows a bright bluish white and sometimes has a bit of an orange tint. While the light might sound like some kind of ghost story or urban legend, it's actually not. It's a real phenomenon that occurs on a regular basis and that has been witnessed by hundreds of people, and maybe you if you decide to go visit. But Still, no one knows why this light appears. There have been, of course, speculative ghost stories. Some people believe that one day, many years ago, a worker was killed on the train tracks and lost his head, and the light is the worker trying to find it again. Others believe he was killed by a co-worker with either a hammer or railroad spike, and some people believe in a much more scientific explanation. Kind of. Underground quartz crystals in the area that are under constant stress cause an electric reaction that results in the glow. Is that true? We don't know. There's not really a lot of scientific evidence to back the scientific theory up. Quotations, of course. The light is always there, but it's only visible at night. Some people believe it to be swamp fog, but that also doesn't make sense. Whole lot of theories for this one, but no real answers. If you have a theory, why not add it to the already very long list down below.
Now we move on to Longview, Texas to discuss a mysterious entity that's said to lurk in the Gregg County Historical Museum. This eerie presence lurks on the second floor, where a century-old iron coffin holds a haunting secret. Larry Corrington, a member of the board of directors, has spent a long time volunteering at the museum and has experienced some pretty unsettling stuff. According to him, while he works downstairs, he sometimes hears this distinct sound of small footsteps echoing near the coffin upstairs, and he's not the only one who's heard them either. Other volunteers have also reported hearing these phantom footsteps. The origins of the iron coffin date back to the 1880s when it was discovered near downtown Longview. Inside the coffin were the remarkably preserved remains of a young girl. It's believed that she passed away while on vacation, and her family, unable to transport her body back home to West Texas, chose to lay her to rest in the iron coffin. Now, the girl's remains were reinterred at Greenwood Cemetery, but the coffin itself found its way to the Gregg County Historical Museum in 1980, where it's been ever since.
Next up, we've got the Well to Hell, located in the back of an old graveyard in Sabattis, Maine. In 1956, it is said that a local boy had been dared by his friends to descend into the well. The young men were in high spirits, making jokes as their friend began his descent into the well. Well, they lowered him down using a rope, but when he reached the bottom, his friends assumed he would call up or yank the rope to signal that he wished to be lifted back out, but there was nothing. Just silence and no sign of movement. Eventually the friends took initiative and dragged the boy back up from the well, but as he emerged from the darkness, he looked like a completely different person. His hair had gone white, his eyes appeared as though they had lost what was human about them. It was like he had aged and completely changed in a matter of minutes, and not only that, but he had gone mad. He was unable to respond when his friends asked him what happened in the well. After the incident, he was confined to a mental institution and he never spoke another word ever again, but he would occasionally scream in terror. What happened in the well that day, no one knows. No one's been able to figure it out, what goes on down there, but I think a pretty good theory is that it was, in fact, a well to hell.
Something massive swam off the coast of Australia, taking bites out of great white sharks as though they were little more than snacks. Scientists placed a tracking device on a healthy 9-foot shark only to discover it abruptly plunging to the depths at extreme speed. When the tag was finally recovered on a beach, the data suggested that the poor shark had been devoured by an even larger predator. Some experts chalk it up to a colossal great white. Others hint at the possibility of a creature so elusive that it still manages to dodge even our best research efforts. Perhaps out there in the dark depths, there's a monster big enough to make even apex predators disappear in a single gulp, like, say, the mighty Megalodon. On July 19th, 1920, the Carroll A. Deering picked up its cargo of coal and set out for delivery to Rio de Janeiro, but on the way, the captain fell quite ill, so the ship had to turn back and head to port nearby in order to drop him off and get another captain on board. By the time September rolled around, the Deering was back on track for Rio and the coal was delivered with no issues. While docked in Rio, however, new Captain Wormel apparently met with an old friend and spoke of his crew on the ship with a bit of disdain, although he did like the ship's engineer, Herbert Bates. On the way home, the ship stopped for supplies in Barbados and there was more gossip, but this time it was between the first mate and another captain, with the first mate talking smack about Captain Wormel. So clearly there was some tension going on this ship. On January 28, 1921, the ship was sighted by the Cape Lookout lightship off of North Carolina, and the lightship's keeper said that someone with a megaphone on the Deering said the ship had lost its anchor and asked the keeper to notify the owners of the Deering, but unfortunately the lightship's radio was out, so no call was ever made. On January 31st, the ship was spotted in what is known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, but because of bad weather, it wasn't boarded until February 4th. Once people got on the boat, however, it was clear that the ship had been completely abandoned. The steering equipment was found to be damaged and the wheel was shattered. The ship's log and navigation equipment were gone, along with all personal belongings and the ship's 2 lifeboats. Since this discovery, at least 5 separate government agencies have tried to figure out what could have possibly happened here and what happened to the entire crew, but it remains a mystery to this day. Because of all the drama, mutiny is suspected to be the most likely explanation, but still, where is the rest of the crew who potentially overthrew the captain? It is likely that we may never know the events that took place during those months on the ship. Jim Gray was an incredibly important computer scientist who was responsible for many computer advancements that changed things for all of us. Other than being a computer scientist, he was also an experienced and skilled sailor, and one day on January 28, 2007, he set sail for a short trip so he could head out and spread his mother's ashes as she had recently passed away. As he began his trip, Jim spoke to his wife on the phone and said that he would call her once he got back in range. After their phone call, he called his daughter as well and left a little message for her, and then he was off on his trip, but unfortunately, he never ended up returning. Jim's wife, Donna, was the one who raised the alarm bells as she was away on a trip, but like I mentioned, Jim said he would call her later, and he never did. At this point is when huge searches begin. Thousands of images of the area where Jim and his boat might be were uploaded to the Amazon Mechanical Turk for people to look through and see if they could find any kind of signs, but to no avail. Jim also had an automatic emergency position indicating beacon on his ship, but whatever happened to Jim and the ship clearly didn't meet the requirements, or perhaps it had some sort of malfunction, or maybe it was even turned off. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jim or his boat, as no signs or trace of either has ever been found. The theories of what may have happened are endless and range from Jim intentionally disappearing to him being taken for his computer skills and brain in order to do some kind of inside job, and everything in between. There most definitely are theories that are seemingly more likely than others, but at the end of the day, they are all a possibility. Pilots and seafarers in the Bermuda Triangle region have reported strange phenomena for decades. Things like compasses spinning wildly, radios cutting out, and time seeming to warp. These stories point to something dubbed the electronic fog, a swirling haze that messes with navigation and communication. Witnesses claim they find themselves traveling thousands of miles off course without even realizing it, or even shaving hours off an otherwise standard journey. Skeptics dismiss these tales as garbled instruments and pilot error, but those who've experienced it are convinced that there is unexplained phenomenon at play. It's the kind of mystery that keeps experienced captains peering nervously at their compasses, hoping not to be the next ones swallowed by the fog. Keith Davis was a fisheries observer with a passion for ocean conservation, boarding commercial vessels to document catches and protect marine life. In 2015, while working aboard a tuna boat in the Pacific, he simply vanished. His gear and personal effects were left behind, and no one claimed to have any clue about his final moments. Like with any mystery, rumors began to circulate. Was he threatening threatening someone's illegal fishing operation? Could he have been lost in rough seas? Or was there foul play beneath the surface? A supposed SOS message crackled over the radio in the late 1940s. Quote, "All officers, including the captain, are dead. Possibly whole crew dead." When researchers boarded the Dutch freighter Orang Medan, they found bodies sprawled on decks and in corridors, faces twisted in terror, but no obvious injuries. Then, just as the boarding party considered towing the ship, it burst into flames and sank. Official records are murky, some dispute whether the vessel even existed, but the chilling detail of an entire crew dying in extreme fear lingers in maritime folklore. Was it a cargo mishap involving chemicals, or something more sinister at play? The final word went down with the ship, leaving dark legends in its wake. On March 21st, 1998, Amy and her family boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, which was a Royal Caribbean cruise ship en route to Curaçao. On March 24th, after a fun night on the ship, Amy was hanging out and having a couple drinks with the ship's band, and one of the members explained that she parted ways with them around 1 a.m. After this, around 5:15 a.m., Amy's father said he saw her sleeping on the cabin balcony. Unfortunately, however, once 6 a.m. rolled around, she wasn't there anymore, and this was the beginning of the mystery. Once it was realized that Amy was missing, extensive searches were launched for full days before they ended up being called off when no signs or traces of Amy had been found. While this is all super mysterious and nobody really had anything to go on, the plot only thickens with this story. Over the years, witnesses claimed to spot her in the company of unidentified individuals, fueling rumors that she might have been taken and forced into a clandestine ring. Official investigations offered no conclusive breakthroughs, and her family's desperate appeals never yielded a definitive lead. The case has become a tragic emblem of how swiftly a person can slip into the oceanic unknown. In 2013, the 70-foot schooner Nina set sail from New Zealand toward Australia with a crew of 6, including an experienced captain known for tackling difficult voyages. A brief text message indicated that they had hit heavy weather, but rescue efforts were launched too late. The Nina vanished without a trace, leaving only partial satellite data suggesting it might have been thrown wildly off course. Debris sightings were reported but never confirmed. Some suspect it capsized in the storm, while others claim its wreckage may be drifting in some uncharted zone. Rebecca Corium was a British crew member and youth worker on the Disney Wonder cruise ship in 2011. In the early morning hours of March 22nd, Rebecca was seen on CCTV footage in the crew lounge speaking to someone on the telephone, and it appeared as though the conversation was a bit emotionally distressing for her. A few hours later, people began to worry because Rebecca hadn't shown up for the start of her shift, which was really unlike her, and when people went to go see if maybe she had slept in or something like that, they were unable to locate her anywhere on the ship, which of course made people even more worried. That CCTV footage of Rebecca is the last known sighting of her, and since then, no one has been able to figure out where she went or what happened to her. The first assumption was of course that perhaps she had gone overboard, and it prompted extensive searches of the waters in the area, but unfortunately nothing turned up. Almost an entire year after her disappearance, someone emailed Rebecca's family to say she was 85% sure that she had seen Rebecca with a man on the streets of Venice, but unfortunately, this potential lead didn't turn up any real evidence or clues. Many people state that perhaps Disney Cruise Lines knows more about what really happened, as other crew members have suggested that the entire ship is covered with so many cameras, there's no way whatever happened could have been missed, but of course there is no evidence that has been discovered which would prove these allegations. It has been nearly 15 years since Rebecca's extremely mysterious disappearance, and still no one knows exactly what happened on that terrible night. And finally, to close out our list today, we have the Ellen Austin. A wooden schooner built in the 1800s, the Ellen Austin had a successful run transporting goods across the Atlantic. That is, until she came upon an abandoned ship adrift near the Bermuda Triangle. Crew members boarded the mystery vessel and attempted to sail it to safety. Not long after, the two ships were separated by a sudden storm. When the Ellen Austin caught up, the other vessel was once again deserted. Determined not to let the ship vanished, the captain sent more men aboard, but again, the two vessels became separated in bad weather, and this time the derelict was never seen again. Historians debate whether the story is true or embellished over time, but it leaves a haunting question. What strange fate claimed the life of that ghostly craft?
And we're starting off this list with Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood was an actress who started out her career as a child, acting in her first film in 1943, but she would continue filming movies into her early 40s, acting in sometimes as much as 3 movies a year. She's probably most famous for playing Maria in West Side Story. The last movie she starred in, along with Christopher Walken, was Brainstorm. Filming took place in 1981, and before the film was even finished, she would die under mysterious circumstances. Wood, along with her husband Robert Wagner, co-star Christopher Walken, and Dennis Davern, who was the captain of the boat, went on a weekend boat trip to Santa Catalina Island on the evening of November 28th. The following morning, Natalie's body was discovered a mile away from the boat. Close by was an inflatable dinghy. It's never been officially determined what happened the previous night. Davern claimed that there had been an intense argument between Wagner and Natalie that night over her relationship with Christopher Walken. There were also bruises found on her body, and 2 people who had been on a nearby boat claimed they had heard screams that night. Ultimately, though, Natalie Wood's death was ruled an accidental drowning. Next, we have Thelma Todd. Thelma Todd was an actress who acted in over 100 films between 1926 and 1935. You'll probably remember her best for her role as Amelia Frisbee in the 1934 comedy smash hit Hips, Hips, Hooray! No? Alright, well, you gotta get up to speed on your film knowledge, I guess. In 1935, Todd was found slumped over the wheel of her car, which was parked in her friend's garage. Jewel Carmen, who was a former wife of Thelma's partner at the time, Roland West. Her death was determined to have been caused by carbon monoxide poisoning. The engine wasn't running though, and there looked to be signs of trauma to her neck, like someone had shoved a hose into it or something. To this day, it's never been determined what exactly happened. Roland West was a suspect for a while, along with Thelma's former husband and a gangster named Lucky Luciano, but there was not enough evidence to ever convict anyone. So in the end, this was determined to be simply an accident. Number 8, Brittany Murphy. A lot of you probably know who Brittany Murphy is. She appeared in tons of movies and shows throughout the 90s and 2000s. Clueless, 8 Mile, she was in Sin City, huge star back in the day. In 2009, in her Los Angeles home, Murphy collapsed in the bathroom. Her husband, Simon Monjack, called 911, and she was transported to Cedars Sinai Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead after going into cardiac arrest. It was determined that her death had been caused by pneumonia and anemia, along with a concoction of over-the-counter cold and prescription medications that were floating through her system. Now, what's odd about this case is that her husband not only initially refused an autopsy on her to find out what exactly caused her death, but he would also die about 5 months later of eerily similar causes, pneumonia and anemia, along with tons of over-the-counter drugs in his system. Some believe that Murphy could have been poisoned, but the case has never been reopened. Joe Pitchler. Joe Pitchler was a child actor appearing mostly in kids' movies in the late 90s and early 2000s. If you grew up watching the Beethoven movies with the dog, he was in the 3rd and 4th sequels. He left acting in high school and was planning to return to it upon graduation, but he went missing at 18 years old, last seen on January 5th, 2006, where he had gone to a party with friends. Pitchler's Toyota Corolla was found 4 days after he went missing. There was a note inside the car where Pitchler had expressed his wishes to, quote, be a better brother and for his personal effects to be given to said younger brother. His cell phone was also found. His last outgoing call was at 4 a.m. to one of his friends who had been at the party with him. Police figured that Pitchler had taken his own life, although no body has ever been discovered, and the family was rather upset, saying not enough action was being taken in the investigation. Police never dusted his car for fingerprints, and apparently they didn't take much time looking through his apartment either, so he's just been missing ever since. Next up, we have the original Superman. Not Christopher Reeve, George Reeves. George Reeves played Superman in the live-action Adventures of Superman series from 1952 to 1958. On June 16th, 1959, Reeves died of a shot wound in the upstairs bedroom of his home. At the time a party was being held in the home, his death was thought to be self-inflicted. There were signs he wasn't doing well mentally, as his career was kind of in a bad way, but there's always been some mystery surrounding this case. There were conflicting stories about where Reeves' fiancée at the time, Lenore Lemon, was. Some say she was downstairs when guests heard a loud bang coming from upstairs, while others report her coming downstairs after the shot rang out, saying, "Tell them I was here, tell them I was down here." Till this day, it's never been determined whether Reeves took his own life or if someone else did, either on purpose or accidentally. Number 5, Marilyn Monroe. On August 5th, 1962, the renowned Hollywood icon was found lifeless in her Brentwood home at the age of 36. The official cause of death was declared as a drug overdose, but the circumstances surrounding the incident have generated conspiracy theories for years. Some believe that Monroe's death was not an accident, but an intentional act, that possibly someone wanted to silence her due to her alleged involvement with some pretty powerful people. She was rumored to have had an affair with John F. Kennedy and was involved with other prominent politicians. Others think she may have actually just taken her own life, but until this day, her death is still a mystery. Next up, we have Bob Crane. Now, Bob Crane is most famous for starring as Hogan in the 60s sitcom Hogan's Heroes. He acted all the way up until his mysterious death in 1978. And there was definitely foul play involved, but the exact circumstances surrounding his death have never been determined. Crane had an interesting hobby. He enjoyed photographing and filming his adult nightly activities with various women, along with his friend John Henry Carpenter, a sales manager for Sony Electronics, who I guess did all the cinematography. I've never seen any of these films. I'm not going to seek them out. On the afternoon of June 29th, 1978, Crane's co-star in a play he was acting in, Victoria Ann Barry, entered his apartment after he had failed to show up for a meeting. His lifeless body was then discovered. He had an electrical cord tied around his neck and had severe trauma to his head. Police thought he was likely hit over the head with a camera tripod, but no one ever found that, and no weapon was ever found either. The prime suspect was his friend John Carpenter, but there was never enough evidence to convict him, so exactly what happened will likely always remain a mystery. Number 3, Kurt Cobain. Yeah, these next 3 have been speculated on extensively. Kurt Cobain really needs no introduction, and if he does, then you're too young to be watching this video. Go listen to some Nirvana. On April 8th, 1994, Cobain's body was discovered with a supposed self-inflicted gunshot wound. Authorities believed he had been deceased for about 3 days when he was found. Cobain had also left a note saying he was no longer interested in writing or creating music. Now, there were signs that Cobain was struggling with being in the spotlight. He was known to have issues with his mental health, and it was determined that he had likely taken his own life. But there have always been conspiracy theories and suspicions surrounding Cobain's wife, Courtney Love, that she could have been responsible for his death. Now, I mean, you can watch tons of videos of people going through these kinds of theories. I think it's just hard for people to accept sometimes that artists whose work they've fallen in love with and meant so much to them may not have had as much genuine happiness in their lives as you'd hope. Sometimes I think it's just easier to wrap your head around foul play. It just gives you someone to blame. Tupac Shakur. Once again, I don't think you really need me to tell you who Tupac is. This was another very big and well-known case that is still hotly discussed to this very day. On September 7th, 1996 in Las Vegas, after attending a Mike Tyson match, Tupac was on his way to Suge Knight's Club 662. While sitting at a stoplight, a white Cadillac sedan pulled up beside him and fired into the car. Shakur suffered multiple gunshot wounds, with 2 striking him in the chest. He was rushed to the hospital, fought for his life for about 6 days, but he succumbed to his wounds on September 13th. And ever since that night, the question of who fired has been on everyone's mind. Was it a gang member? Was it a rival rapper? Tupac had survived the shooting 2 years earlier that he believed Biggie and Puff Daddy could have set up somehow, and just 6 months later, Notorious B.I.G. also died in a drive-by. Whoever these shooters were, they have never been found. Finally, we have Bruce Lee. So an absolute legend, everyone knows who Bruce Lee is, but if you are a martial arts or action movie fan and you've never taken the time to watch one of his movies, please do. This man is a legend for a very good reason. Now, Bruce was in peak physical condition when he died in 1973 at 32 years of age. He had met with a producer named Raymond Chow, along with actress Betty Ting Pai, to go over the script for Game of Death. Later in the evening, Lee had a severe headache, and Ting gave him a painkiller called a Quadrisec. Lee went to take a nap, but he never woke up. He was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. It was determined that Lee had suffered a fatal cerebral edema. His brain had swollen up. He had collapsed 2 months earlier while recording replacement dialogue for Enter the Dragon, where a cerebral edema was also found to be the cause. But as to what actually caused this swelling, we're still not 100% sure. And after his death, several hypotheses began floating around. There's a theory that Bruce Lee had a curse placed on him. Another theory is that the triads could have had something to do with it. Lee had just finished making his biggest movie to date, this time in Hollywood with Enter the Dragon, which some think could have ticked off the Chinese mafia. And in 1994, Lee's son Brandon Lee, of course, also died prematurely on the set of his biggest movie, The Crow. And we're going to kick off the list with the legend of the Hook Man. Now, supposedly on Pond Run Road in the village of New Richmond, there once lived a doctor and his wife. They had a son who was mentally disturbed, and these two were ashamed of him and opted to keep him out of the public eye. This meant chaining him up in the basement whenever people were over, or when they just didn't want him in their presence. One night, there was a terrible storm. A bolt of lightning hit their house and a fire started. When authorities arrived on the scene, they found the parents burnt to death, which was the perfect outcome for despicable people like that. But the boy, who had been chained up in the basement at the time, was nowhere to be found, aside from his hand, still chained up to the wall in the basement. So where did he go? Well, legends started to spread that over the years he grew up stalking through the woods, stealing from homes nearby, brandishing a hook for a hand, and brutalizing innocent people, especially young couples. The urban legend of the Hook Man is one you see all over the place. This is just Ohio's specific version of the tale. If you're liking our channel so far, by the way, if you're new here, why not hit that subscribe button? You got nothing to lose. It's free. We got awesome videos coming at you on the daily. Alright, next on the list we have Munchkinland. This urban legend of Munchkinland, also known as Tiny Town in Cincinnati, Ohio, centers around a peculiar area near Rumpke Landfill. Here, a cluster of small houses and buildings allegedly housed a community of little people. According to local lore, these tiny inhabitants were notorious for hurling rocks at passing cars, attempting to deter any intruders. Numerous tales circulated about unsuspecting individuals who stopped their cars in the vicinity, only to find themselves confronted by enraged little folk armed with rocks and ready to defend their territory. As to where these little people are said to have come from, the legend goes that they were retired circus performers. Now, there actually was a collection of small structures in this area. They've recently been torn down, I believe. But as to why they were there are lots of different stories, including, of course, that they were built by the little retired circus performers. A more likely explanation, though, is that they had been built by a farmer on the land who had decided he wanted to start running hay rides, and that he built the houses on the property. But I think it's still a bit murky as to how they got there. Number 8, the Peninsula Python. So this incident involved the discovery of a large python in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Peninsula, Ohio in the summer of 1944. The question obviously was, how did this python, native to tropical regions, end up in a park in Ohio? For a while, authorities didn't even think the reports were real, or at least they didn't think people were really seeing what they thought they were seeing. A massive snake stalking the area became something of an urban legend at the time, but turns out that there indeed was a python, and as to how it got there, some believed that it had been a pet released by its owner, others speculated it had escaped from a traveling circus or a private exotic animal collection. It's still a bit of a mystery to this day as to how it really got there. The python was never even found. It likely died during the winter, but some say it's still stalking its way out there. At number 7, we have Gore Orphanage. Light of Hope Orphanage was established in 1902. It was run by a religious zealot. One day the building caught fire, and the young ones inside all perished in the flames, the cries for help being unheard. The question was, how did the fire start? Well, some say it was an accident, maybe one of the orphans dropped a lamp, but then there's the legend of Old Man Gore, the cruel, sadistic man who ran the facility. In reality, the man's name was Johann Sprunger. He ran the orphanage with his wife, Katerina. It was actually a former orphanage they ran that caught on fire. It was true that they were cruel, though. Orphans attempted escaping from the institution on a number of occasions. There was also a fire in an elementary school in the nearby town of Collinwood, where 176 young people died. So most likely these two real-life incidents were combined and kind of formed this urban legend that is Gore Orphanage. Next on the list, we have the disappearance of Brian Schaefer. In 2006, Brian Schaefer, a medical student at Ohio State University, completely vanished. On the night of March 31st, Schaefer went out with friends to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar near the campus in Columbus. Surveillance footage captured him entering the bar, but never showed him actually leaving. When his friends realized he was missing, they figured he'd gone home, but he hadn't. And surveillance footage from the bar showed footage of Brian speaking with two women outside the bar just before 2 a.m. His friends had already left at this point. Then he went back inside and that was it. No trace of him after that. And here's the thing, the bar only had one entrance, monitored by surveillance cameras, which didn't record Brian leaving. On top of that, there were no signs of foul play in his apartment. Over the years, there's been lots of speculation as to what happened here, but one theory is that he voluntarily disappeared and is alive, hopefully anyway, living with a new identity. At our number 5 spot, we have Amy. On Lick Road, just outside of Cincinnati, a terrible incident is said to have taken place. A woman named Amy lost her life at the hands of someone, but the perpetrator was never found. The prevailing theory is that her boyfriend did it, though. As the years passed, tales of Amy's ghost haunting Lick Road began to spread, making the ghost of Amy one of the most prominent urban legends in Ohio. Supposedly, there are a couple ways to experience the ghost of Amy. One legend goes that if you flick your headlights onto the sign as you're turning on to Lick Road at night, you can see the name Amy briefly flash on the sign. Another goes that if you park your car at the cul-de-sac facing the woods, then flash your headlights 3 times, your windows will start to fog up with the word help being written in the condensation. Some nightly visitors have claimed to see the ghostly figure of Amy standing at the edge of the forest. Others claim to hear disembodied footsteps behind them as they make their way across the bridge. Next up, we have Satan's Hollow. In Cincinnati, there is a famous drainage tunnel, a tunnel with a very dark history. Strange and ominous things are said to have happened there. Satanic rituals and disappearances supposedly plague the tunnel, and one story goes that during one of these rituals, a portal to the underworld was accidentally opened. This has led to a number of locals believing this series of interconnected tunnels are actually a portal to hell itself now. People claim to hear strange noises coming from its depths and have even witnessed a shadowy figure known as the Shadow Man, a demonic entity who stalks the tunnel at night. The Werewolf of Defiance. So in the summer of 1972, the small town of Defiance, Ohio was rocked by a series of bizarre and terrifying encounters with what locals would describe as the Werewolf of Defiance. First reported sighting occurred when 2 railroad workers, Ted Davis and Tom Jones, were laboring on the Norfolk and Western Railway. Ted Davis, busy with his work, suddenly looked up to witness something completely unexplainable. A large wolf-like creature clutching a wooden board in its paws. The creature then just whacked Ted on the shoulder with the board before vanishing into the nearby bushes. I like the imagery of that. Just a werewolf come walking out. Bam! All right, goodbye. Anyway, 5 days later, Ted and Tom returned to work, hoping that the strange encounter was just a one-time event. But unfortunately, they spotted this pesky werewolf again. Luckily, it was much further away this time, and they just booked it out of there. They reported the incident to the local police, and before long, this wave of similar reports flooded in from various parts of Defiance. More and more residents claimed to have encountered a wolf man-like creature. People were scared to go outside. Like, nobody wants to be gored by a massive-sized wolf person. The sightings, did trail off, but the Wolfman of Defiance has remained a legend of Ohio ever since. And at second place, we have the Crosswick Monster. This incident took place in 1982 and has become a prominent tale in Ohio's cryptid folklore. According to this story, two young boys, Ed and Joe Lynch, encountered a terrifying creature in a field. They heard peculiar noises coming from the tall grass, and before they could react, a massive four-legged lizard-like beast emerged. The creature swiftly approached them, grabbing 13-year-old Ed in its jaws and began dragging him towards a hollowed-out tree. Fortunately, though, the boys' screams caught the attention of three nearby men who rushed in to help. They managed to rescue Ed, but he sustained some pretty severe injuries. In response to this initial attack, a group of 60 men armed themselves with axes and clubs, and I'm imagining torches, and they formed a posse to hunt down this creature. They managed to catch up with it, and at one point it stood up on its hind legs. The chase led them to a hill of rocks where the creature vanished into a hole, never to be seen again. The story was written up in the local paper at the time, and it's since grown to be a staple of Ohio's folklore. Just what the hell was the thing that they saw that day? And finally, at our number one spot, we have the Circleville Rider. The Circleville letters case, which began in 1976 in Circleville, Ohio. Is it Circleville or Circleville? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, it's still one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in the state. It all began with these anonymous, threatening letters sent to numerous residents. The letters contained detailed, personal information about the recipients' lives, leading to this fear and paranoia throughout the community. The mysterious writer knew intimate details about the victims' private lives and warned them to cease certain behaviors. One of the primary recipients, Mary Gillespie, was particularly targeted. The sender claimed she had been having an affair, which Mary insisted was not true, and the situation escalated when Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received a letter warning him that he would be unalived. The case took a tragic turn when Ron Gillespie was found dead in his crashed car. His death was ruled an accident, but many suspected foul play. The letters persisted even after Ron's death, leaving the town baffled about the identity of the sender. Several theories emerged, including suspicions about a local school superintendent and Mary's brother-in-law, but no conclusive evidence was ever found, leaving the case unsolved. This incident has inspired numerous legends and conspiracy theories. Stories have spread about the letters having been written by some sort of vengeful ghost or spirit haunting the town, even.
Coming in at number 10 is Russell and Shirley Dermond, Georgia. In May 2014, elderly couple Russell and Shirley Dermond were expected to attend a party for the 2014 Kentucky Derby with their neighbors, who grew concerned when the couple did not show up. On May 6th, when the neighbors went into their house to check on them, the neighbor found the door unlocked and entered the house. Russell's decapitated body was found on the floor of his two-car garage, lying in a small pool of blood. When police were unable to locate Shirley inside the house, they initially suspected that she had been kidnapped. 10 days later, Shirley's body was found by a fisherman on Lake Oceanee. An autopsy found that she died from either 2 or 3 deep wounds to the head from a blunt object. Now, Russell's head has never been found, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Number 9. Josh Maddox, Colorado. On May 8th, 2008, Josh Maddox left the house, telling his sister Kate that he was going out for a walk. He often went out hiking alone, so when his sister saw him at the house before he left, she thought little of it. But when he failed to return later that evening, his family became worried. On May 13th, 5 days after he disappeared, his father, Mike, called the police to report Josh missing. The authorities, friends, and family scoured the neighborhood and nearby Parkland area where Josh may have decided to go walking. After months of searching, nothing had been uncovered and hopes faded. Then, 7 years later, in August 2015, less than a mile away from Josh's home, property developer Chuck Murphy was demolishing an old wood cabin to make way for 32 new family homes. Now, the cabin had been used in years and the inside was damp and rotten. Work to demolish the chimney inside the cabin started, and to the surprise of the demolition team, crammed inside the brickwork was a mummified body, which was later confirmed as Josh's. His body was naked apart from a thin shirt, and his clothes were neatly stacked inside the cabin. Now, an autopsy found no evidence of any drugs in Josh's remains. He said, "The heart tissue showed no signs of trauma. There were no broken bones, no knife marks, there were no bullet holes. There is so far no answers to a number of things. It is very confusing. It was not an instant death. It seems like we might never know what happened to Josh that fateful day." Number 8. Dan Cooper, U.S. airspace. Now, one of the most famous heists in history occurred on November 24th, 1971, when a man who identified himself as Dan Cooper bought a one-way ticket to Seattle on Northwest Orient Airlines from Portland, Oregon. After the plane was airborne, Dan handed the flight attendant a note. Now, at first, she just put it in her pocket without looking at it, but then he told her, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a..." He then opened a briefcase to reveal red-colored sticks surrounded by an array of wires. He told the flight attendant to write down everything he was saying and then take it to the captain. The note said, "I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash exclusively in $20 bills, put in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff or I'll do the job." FBI agents assembled the ransom money, and Seattle police obtained the parachutes from a local skydiving school. When Dan claimed his demands were met, he allowed all passengers and some of the crew to exit the airplane. He told the remaining crew to refuel the plane and chart a course for Mexico City while staying below 10,000 feet. Then somewhere between Seattle and Reno, he jumped from the plane with the money and was never seen again. Now, despite an expansive manhunt and over 45 years of searching, no conclusions have been made as to the man's identity or his fate after he jumped. Today, it is called one of the greatest cold cases in FBI and US history. Number 7. The Zodiac, California. The Zodiac took the lives of 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. Now, he coined this name in a series of taunting letters and cards that he mailed to regional newspapers. Now, some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers in which he claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Now, he targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver. 2 of his wounded victims survived, and the Zodiac would attempt to end the lives of a couple on a hillside at Lake Berryessa, but only the woman would succumb to her injuries. The man would live to tell the story of what happened and give his creepy description of the hooded serial slayer. Now, the Zodiac claimed to have taken the lives of 37 victims and has been linked to several other cold cases, some in Southern California or outside the state. While many theories regarding the identity of the Zodiac have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher who died in 1992. Number 6. Amber Hagerman, Texas. A young Amber Hagerman was riding her bicycle in a parking lot of an abandoned grocery store in Arlington, Texas on January 13, 1996, when she was kidnapped. A witness told police that he saw a man get out of a black pickup truck, grab her off the bicycle, and forced her into his truck as she kicked and screamed. Now, despite the massive search, she wasn't found, and then 4 days later, a man walking his dog found Amber's body in a creek about 4 miles from where she was abducted. Autopsy reports revealed that she had died of cut wounds to the neck. Now, as of January of last year, police have received and investigated more than 7,000 tips related to the case. "I miss her every day, and she's just so full of life, and I want to know why her? She was only a little girl," Amber's mother, Donna Williams, said last year. Now, police say there is limited evidence in the case, but they hope that the new DNA technologies can help them catch who was responsible. Now, her abduction led to the invention of Amber Alerts, and although some people might think they're annoying, they do save lives. Number 5. Tylenol poisoning, Illinois. On September 29, 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area ingested poisoned Tylenol pills, consequently collapsing and dying shortly after. Now, bottles of the popular pain and fever reliever were spiked with cyanide and returned to store shelves, targeting random people. After all the victims were buried on October 1st, 1982, it was revealed that the Tylenol bottles were intentionally poisoned. Immediately, over 31 million bottles of Tylenol were recalled by the manufacturer, software and were issued warnings. They also offered to replace recalled bottles with new bottles and offered a $100,000 reward to anyone who may have any information on the perpetrator. Now, these precautions cost the company over $100 million, and there were several more copycat deaths across the United States after the initial incident had occurred. Now, this led to the invention of the safety seals that you see on medicine bottles today, and to this day, no suspect has ever been charged or convicted of poisonings. Number 4. The Axeman, New Orleans. From 1918 to 1919, the Axeman of New Orleans ended the lives of 6 people and left 6 more severely injured. An Italian grocery store owner and his wife were the first victims. They were found in bed at home with their throats cut and skulls bashed in with an axe. The victims who followed were also found in bed, and no valuable belongings were taken. A newspaper received a letter with demands for the following Tuesday night that said, "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home jazz band plays in full swing at the time I've just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of you people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe." Now, on that Tuesday night, the streets of New Orleans filled with jazz and nobody was harmed. Then, in October 1919, the deaths ended just as quickly as they had begun, and the criminal was never found. Number 3. Jeanette DePalmer, New Jersey. In 1972, in Springfield, New Jersey, a dog brought a decomposing forearm to its owner. They quickly alerted the police, and this prompted a police search, and a body was soon found on a cliff. The body was identified as Jeanette DePalmer, a girl who was missing for 6 weeks. Now, the hill where she was discovered was covered with occult symbols, and many were led to believe that her body was placed on a makeshift altar. Many locals and even some police officers pointed their fingers at an alleged coven of witches who were rumored to have used Jeanette for a human sacrifice, and others said it was a satanic group. Now, reports from local papers mentioned the police couldn't determine the cause of death due to the body's decomposition, and authorities investigated a local homeless man who was a prime suspect, only to find no connection to the crime. Many believe that Jeanette may have provoked a group of Satan-worshipping teens at her high school, since she was involved with a group that helped drug addicts find their faith in Christ. Now, to this day, her death remains unsolved. Number 2. Brooklyn Farthing, Kentucky. On June 21st, 2013, Brooklyn Farthing, her younger sister Paige, and cousin went to a field party. Paige and Brooklyn's cousin decided to leave the party early on, while Brooklyn had been plans to sleep over at a friend's house who was also at the party, so she was going to stay. However, when Brooklyn's friend decided she wanted to spend the night at a boy's house, the two argued and the friend left. Now, towards the end of the party, Brooklyn was seen leaving with 2 young men, and one of the men was dropped off, but the other man took Brooklyn to his house. It was at around 4 a.m. on June 22nd that Brooklyn called Paige and asked if their cousin could come pick her up. However, the cousin had had too many drinks and was in no condition to drive. Now, Brooklyn didn't want her mother to have to come get her, so she called her ex-boyfriend. He agreed to give her a ride home when he got off work. It was at this point that the man who brought Brooklyn to the house left. Now, before long, Brooklyn's ex-boyfriend received several texts from her saying, "Can you hurry, please hurry, and then I'm scared." Then another text came in telling the ex to never mind, and that Brooklyn was going to another party. He asked who she was going with, but there was no response, and Brooklyn hasn't been heard from or seen since. And coming in at number 1 is Tara Calico, New Mexico. On the morning of September 20th, 1988 in Bella, New Mexico, Tara Calico borrowed her mother's pink bike to go out for a ride. She planned to play tennis that afternoon and asked her mom to drive out after her in case she got a flat tire and didn't return home by noon. Now, she never did return, and no one knew what happened to her. Every lead went dead until about a year later, when a photo was found depicting a young woman, her age, and a missing boy, both gagged. The Polaroid photograph was found in a parking lot outside a junior food store in Florida. Michael Henley went missing in the same area as Tara in April of 1988 when he was hunting turkeys with his father. Now, they appear to be in the back of a van with a copy of a book written by V.C. Andrews, Tara's favorite author, lying right beside the girl. Now, initially, Tara's mother didn't think the girl was her, but the girl in the photograph had a scar identical to Tara's. In 1990, Michael Henley's body was found in Zuni Mountains, where he was was hunting, which strongly disconnected the theory that the two were abducted and taken to Florida, but unfortunately Tara's parents would eventually die, never finding out who took their daughter. Coming in at number 10 is Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist, and one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955. Now, he died on April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, as he was assassinated. Claims soon arose over suspect aspects of King's assassination and the controversial role of the alleged assassin, James Earl Ray. Although his guilty plea eliminated the possibility of a trial before a jury, within days Ray had recanted and claimed his confession was forced. Suspicions were further raised by the confirmation of illegal surveillance of King by the FBI and the CIA, and the FBI's attempt to prompt King to end his own life. In 1979, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of King and that Ray was a scapegoat. In 1999, a mixed-race jury at a Memphis civil suit reached an anonymous verdict that King was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy involving the US government. After the verdict, Coretta King said, "There is abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband." The jury found the mafia and various local, state, and federal government agencies were deeply involved in the assassination, and Mr. Ray was set up to take the blame. Number 9. Brittany Murphy's death. Actress Brittany Murphy was sick with pneumonia when she collapsed in the bathroom of her home. Firefighters attempted to resuscitate her before she was transported to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but 2 hours after the initial 911 call, she died at the hospital from cardiac arrest. An autopsy determined that Brittany died of pneumonia exacerbated by anemia and multiple drug intoxication. The drugs, over-the-counter cold medicines, and prescription medications were all legal but at elevated levels. Her husband Simon Monjack raised suspicions by initially refusing an autopsy to understand exactly what happened to his wife, but just 5 months later, Simon died in the same bedroom of eerily similar causes, pneumonia and anemia. He also had an elevated level of prescription drugs in his system. Many people believe that the home had toxic mold in it, and Brittany's mother dismissed this idea, as did the coroner, but she later became convinced toxic mold was the cause of the deaths while trying to sell the home. Brittany's father had a different theory, that she had her life ended by someone. I have a feeling that there was definitely a situation here. He told Good Morning America, "Yeah, it's poison, yes, I know that." The basis for this claim was the result of an independent toxicology report he had done on a sample of Brittany's hair. The report detailed the presence of 10 heavy metals in her hair, which the report claimed suggested the possibility of foul play. Her father later filed a suit against the Los Angeles coroner's office and the Los Angeles Police Department, hoping in vain to have his daughter's body re-examined and the case reopened. Number 8. Natalie Wood's death. On November 29, 1981, the actress and movie star Natalie Wood drowned while on a boating trip with her husband, Robert Wagner. Robert had reported Natalie missing after a night of drinking, and her body was found several hours later, floating face down in the water, wearing a flannel nightgown, down jacket, and socks. Now, at first, her death was ruled accidental, but the bruises on her body led law enforcement to consider foul play, with Robert as the prime suspect. The couple had an argument on the yacht before she went missing, a fact Robert initially denied, but fully admitted to in his 2008 autobiography, further arousing suspicions in the fact that 4 hours had elapsed between the time Robert and Dennis Davrin, the captain, realized Natalie was missing and when they called the Coast Guard. Most concerning, though, were the statements that Lana Wood alleges the boat captain Dennis Davrin made to her on a drunken phone call. According to Lana, Dennis said that after the star couple quarreled, it appeared to him as though RJ, Robert Wagner, shoved her away and she went overboard. Dennis panicked and RJ said, "Leave her there, teach her a lesson." Lana added that Dennis didn't think Robert intended for her sister to drown, but he didn't run to her aid. Number 7. Joe Pitchler disappearance. In the late 90s and early 2000s, child and teen actor Joe Pitchler appeared in a series of small and supporting roles in a number of movies and TV shows, most notably as Brennan Newton in the Beethoven family film franchise. According to the Charlie Project, Joe spoke with a friend at about 4 a.m. on January 5, 2006 in his northeastern Washington hometown of Bremerton, Bremerton. A few weeks before his 19th birthday, he left his apartment untouched, unlocked, and with the lights on, and apparently took only his wallet and car keys before he disappeared without telling anyone where he might be going, apart from some poems that spoke to his depressing mindset. 4 days later, Joe's Toyota Corolla was located in Bremerton, and authorities suspected that Joe may have jumped to his death off a bridge over Port Madison Narrows, but no evidence of that nor his remains were ever recovered. Number 6. Brian Jones's death. Brian Jones was a musician, songwriter, and record producer. Around midnight on July 2nd, 1969, his body was discovered at the bottom of the swimming pool at his estate. He was pulled from the pool and had CPR performed on him, but was pronounced dead upon arriving at the hospital. Now, Brian's death came just 6 weeks after Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Charlie Watts informed him he was out of the band. Accounts of the night Brian died say that prior to him going for a swim, he had been drinking brandy and taking sleeping pills, and as a result was unsteady on his feet and his speech was garbled. An autopsy declared his death was due to drowning, later clarified as death by misadventure. His daughter, though, Barbara Marion, contends that her father may have had his life ended by someone on purpose and believes that his death was never properly investigated by the authorities. Rumors have alleged for years that Frank Thorogood, a builder who was working on Brian's house who was the last person to see him alive, may have ended his life after a dispute over money. Number 5. Marilyn Monroe's death. The world was shaken on August 5th, 1962 when Marilyn Monroe was found dead at the age of 36 in her home in Los Angeles. The cause? A barbiturate overdose that was ruled as her most likely taking her own life. Now, this led many to doubt the star, rumored to have been involved in extramarital affairs with both John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy, had taken her own life. Instead, conspiracy theories have long suspected that Marilyn had her life ended by being forced to take the drugs that resulted in her death to keep her from talking about the Kennedy brothers. Now, to this day, the CIA continues to maintain files on Marilyn's death, but it is unlikely anyone will ever know what really happened. Number 4. Death of the Black Dahlia. On January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth Short, an aspiring actor, was found dead in residential Los Angeles. Her body was so mutilated as the body was cut in half and so pale and drained of blood that the woman who discovered it thought she had stumbled upon a mannequin. Now, the body was cut with surgical precision, leaving no trauma to internal organs and bones. Her face was also cut from her mouth to ears, leaving an eerie permanent smile. There was no blood on the ground, making it believed that the body was moved after she had died. 9 days after she was discovered, an envelope was sent to the Examiner that read, "The Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." Now, as promised, the envelope contained her social security card, birth certificate, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book. Then on March 14th, a note was found saying, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I'm too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary." Now, although many suspects were named, no authorities were able to identify who ended the Black Dahlia's life. Number 3. Princess Diana's death. Princess Diana was constantly hounded by paparazzi, which resulted in her death. On August 31st, 1997, Diana was fatally injured in a car crash at the Point de Lama tunnel in Paris. She left the Ritz in Paris at around 12:20 a.m. and her car went into the tunnel, where the driver lost control and crashed into a pillar. Diana was critically injured but died later that morning in the hospital. Now, because Diana was so loved and hated by the royals for being so loved, there's a conspiracy theory that the royal family planned for her to die. Now, in the months immediately preceding her death, although she was attempting to live her life as normally as she could, even though she got divorced, Diana expressed fears that she would have her life ended, most likely by a staged car crash. The end came in a way similar to how she predicted it, but what we may never know is whether the crash was an accident, as subsequent investigations determined, or staged as she feared. Number 2. Shelley Miscavige disappearance. Shelley Miscavige is a member of the Church of Scientology Sea Org who married Scientology leader David Miscavige. She was last seen in public in August of 2007. Since her disappearance, she has been the subject of speculation and inquiries regarding her whereabouts and well-being. In 2012, attorneys who said they represented her responded by saying that she was merely living a private life devoted to the Church of Scientology. Some former Sea Org members have said that they believe Shelley is being held against her will at the compound of the Scientologist Church of Spiritual Technology Corporation near the mountain town of Running Springs in San Bernardino County, California. In August 2013, actress Leah Remini, a former Scientologist and critic of the organization, filed a missing persons report regarding Shelley with the Los Angeles Police Department which was closed within hours by the LAPD as unfounded. So where is Shelley? It seems like we might never know. And coming in at number 1 is Elliott Smith's death. Elliott Smith was a musician and singer-songwriter. There was lots of controversy surrounding his death as it was just strange. Elliott died on October 21st, 2003 from 2 stab wounds to the chest. He was at his apartment where he lived with his girlfriend, Jennifer Chiba. According to Jennifer, the two were arguing and she locked herself in the bathroom to take a shower. She heard him scream and upon opening the door saw Elliott standing with a knife in his chest. She pulled the knife out, after which he collapsed and she called 911. While his death was reported as him taking his own life, the official autopsy report released in December 2003 left open the question of homicide. The report said that he had been stabbed twice, both wounds had entered his chest cavity, and one had perforated his heart. That in itself is not suspicious. Gruesome as it sounds, people who choose to stab themselves to death frequently jab the weapon into their chest a number of times. Elliott, however, had no hesitation wounds, cuts made as the victim works up the nerve to force the weapon through, and he had stabbed himself through his clothing. The autopsy also found small lacerations on both of his hands and under his right arm, which it described as possible defensive wounds. Claim that Jennifer reported removal of the knife from Elliott and subsequent refusal to speak with detectives were all of concern.